Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. Chapter 1. The Fat Loser of Shushan Kasimijoka Utah. Are you even listening to me? Hey. What is it, Sawamura-san? You. I hate that attitude of yours the most. Where's the explanation I asked for? Explanation? All I know is, getting paired with you for the spring trip was a stroke of bad luck. You think I wanted to be paired with someone from another grade? Ariri clenched her fists, fuming. Utah, by contrast, remained expressionless and looked like she had no intention of dealing with Ariri. I've got things to do. Could you please not bother me, Sawamura-san? Just then, Utah furrowed her brows slightly and turned to glance toward a certain direction with suspicion. At the entrance of the restroom not far away stood a tall, overweight guy who radiated a gloomy aura. The classic fat loser. Kitakami Yoru froze, then hurriedly averted his gaze. He'd just been using the restroom when he heard a loud argument and came out to see what was going on. Out of curiosity, he stopped to watch. These two. They're Sawamura Spencer Ariri, from my grade, and the upperclassman Kasimijoka Utah, right? After a brief moment of hesitation, Yoru slightly lifted his eyelids and snuck a glance out of the corner of his eye. As expected, he hadn't mistaken them. But Utah had her back to him. So how did she suddenly turn around and lock eyes with him like she'd noticed his presence all along? Yoru was a bit surprised and found himself slightly curious about the argument between Ariri and Utah. But after Utah spotted him, all he could think about was getting out of there as fast as possible. Getting close to girls always brought him trouble. On the other side, Utah saw Yoru and realized it was someone completely forgettable. A total non-entity. So she paid him no mind. You piss me off, you dumb woman. Ariri exploded when Utah ignored her and looked ready to throw a fit. Clearly, she hadn't noticed Yoru yet. Still want to argue? Look over there. Utah tilted her head slightly toward Yoru. What? Ariri followed her gaze, and her aggressive demeanor instantly softened. Humphrey, always pretending to be so innocent at school. Utah crossed her arms and scoffed coldly. What nonsense are you talking about? You just wait. Ariri, exposed by Utah, tried to save face by shouting back. Enough already. Stop bothering me. Who Henry-kun spends time with has nothing to do with you. Annoyed, Utah turned and walked off. Ariri wanted to chase after her but thought twice. Someone else was watching. To maintain her cool persona at school, she had no choice but to let it go. Before leaving, she shot a disgusted glare at Yoru, her eyes full of contempt, like he was trash. Totally unfiltered disdain. Even her nose looked like it was pointing to the sky. Just sitting quietly at home, and misfortune falls from the heavens. Yoru was already used to this kind of thing. He felt nothing. After all, he had always been a classic fat, unpopular loser. Last year's checkup, 176 centimeters tall, almost 300 pounds. He'd been isolated since elementary school, constantly picked on for being fat. No one wanted to play with him, and over time, he became reclusive. Back in middle school, he shared the same route home as a girl. In a hurry, he accidentally bumped into her. The next day, rumors spread that he was a pervert who had been stalking her and finally acted out. Even when he tried to explain, no one believed him. It just made things worse. He'd had a few incidents like that. Sometimes even baseless, absurd rumors popped up that not even he understood. Eventually, he learned to stay alone, avoiding social interaction. Especially with girls. Sighing, Yoru walked to the sink and splashed cold water on his face. The face in the mirror was indeed chubby, gloomy, with hair covering his temples and brows. But if you looked closely, his facial features weren't bad. His skin was even quite fair thanks to staying indoors. Just too much fat on his face. If he lost weight, it wouldn't be so bad. Sadly, he inherited his dad's body type. Gains weight just from drinking water. Losing weight was 10 times harder than normal. Staring at the mirror, Yoru pictured his father, slightly bald, dark circles, glasses, mildly obese. A middle-aged man bearing a 70% resemblance to him. Kitakami Toyotani. His father, currently a mid-level manager at a venture capital firm. He only ate lean meat and vegetables, did physical work, and still wasn't able to slim down. Yoru didn't have even half his dad's self-discipline. Even after suffering through extreme dieting and psychological stress to lose a few dozen pounds, one moment of weakness and it all bounced back. Yoru had failed over and over again. In the end, he gave up entirely. How did my super fat dad manage to marry someone like my mom? Yoru gave a bitter smile in the mirror. His mother, Kitakami Megumi, ran a flower shop. Yoru had seen her youth photos. She was a true beauty, even more stunning than someone like Kasumijoka Utaha. Which always confused him. He hadn't seen photos of his dad when he was young, but he was certain. He was fat even back then. So how did such a plain, chubby man win over a top-tier beauty? It remained a mystery to him. He probably hadn't had a normal conversation with a stranger in 10 years. He often muttered to himself. As he pinched the fat on his cheeks, Yoru thought silently. He'd fantasize too. Just like those manga or light novel fat protagonists. After some major trauma, they commit to losing weight and eventually turn into ridiculously handsome guys. But that was fiction. Yoru knew better. If he really did slim down, maybe he'd look average. Maybe with his mom's genes, slightly better than average. But turning into a one-in-a-million handsome guy, making all the girls who once mocked him fall in love? No way. That was a light novel protagonist's life, not his. How could I ever be that guy? I can't even lose weight. Yoru shook his head. No point in dreaming. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Chapter 2, Mufagirasu and the Misunderstanding. At the end of March, the Tokyo sun at 9 a.m. felt warm on the skin. Yoru sensed trouble and, dragging his heavy body, hurried back to the warehouse in the main building. He had lost track of time. As soon as he ran inside, 3 Chiaru-styled senior girls from Shuchen Academy approached him with displeased expressions. Yoru immediately knew things were bad. Hey, where did you go? Does it take that long just to go to the bathroom? The leading senior crossed one arm over her chest, holding a checklist in the other hand, which she thrust in front of Yoru. Sorry, senpai. Yoru started to apologize. But her expression quickly changed from annoyance to disgust. Take it. She flung the list at him and said to the other 2 girls, let's go. Yoru caught the checklist. It listed the supplies the 4 of them had to carry for the spring trip. They needed to move them from the warehouse to the tour bus waiting at the school gate. Most of the items were large and heavy. Unfortunately, he had been grouped with the 3 senior girls from Shuchen. All the work had been dumped on him, likely because he looked easy to push around. They didn't carry a single thing. Yoru stared at the checklist silently. The senior girls, meanwhile, walked away chatting. Is this really okay? What if he complains to the teacher? Don't worry, if the teacher asks, we'll just say he was looking at us lecherously and tried to get close to us. No one would believe that fat loser anyway. Exactly, and he's just a junior from the impure category. Don't worry about it. Let's go take a break. Ugh, he's fat and disgusting, and he even gave himself a handsome-sounding name like he thinks that'll make him good-looking. What a joke. Hearing this, Yoru clenched his fist as big as a sandbag, then slowly relaxed it and quietly walked into the warehouse. The warehouse was large, with many students working in pairs to move supplies. Many of the boys were busy and chatting excitedly. For this spring trip, they had been assigned to a group full of beautiful girls, and even the 2 accompanying teachers were the beautiful Shizuka Hiratsuka and Mifagirasu. They were all happy. But no matter what, Yoru couldn't feel happy at all. Shuchen Academy was a long-established school located in Tokyo's Minato Ward, a prestigious institution designed to serve noble families. The students who studied here were all children of high society. Some of them even destined to shoulder the future of the nation. In recent years, to comply with national policy, Shuchen began accepting students from the outside. Yoru's parents wanted to give him the best possible environment. Though their family could barely be called middle class, they gritted their teeth and donated a large sum of money to get their average achieving son into the school through connections. They also had to pay a hefty tuition fee every year. Shuchen's environment, facilities, and teachers. Everything was truly top-notch. However, the school referred to students who had studied there since childhood as pure division, while students who transferred in later were called impure division. The gap between pure and impure division students was like a chasm between heaven and hell. Impure students had very low status at school and were usually looked down on by the pure students. There were a few exceptions. For instance, Ariri and Kasumijoka Utaha were both from the impure division. But Ariri was the daughter of a UK diplomat. Her family background was more prestigious than many pure students. She was also a cute white-skinned half-Japanese girl, so everyone tried to get close to her. Kasumijoka Utaha didn't come from a distinguished family. But ever since she enrolled, she consistently topped both academics and athletics, standing out as someone you couldn't take your eyes off. She was beautiful, and without question the most admired girl among the male students. Privately, some students even offered absurd amounts to buy her used stockings and shoes. Some even wandered in front of her hoping for a scornful look at the bug kind of glare from her. But Utaha always ignored them. Yoru clearly didn't belong to that minority. He was at the bottom of the food chain. Even in a regular school, Yoru hoisted a packed camping tent onto his shoulder. He was tall and fat, even stronger than most adult men. Doing the work of two people was no problem for him. To his peers, he looked like an oppressive mountain, so no one dared to physically bully him directly. The tour bus was parked at Shuchin's gate. The walk back and forth with supplies was about 200 meters. Just think of it as losing weight, Yoru told himself. After 5 or 6 trips, he was drenched in sweat and exhausted. He took shelter under a tree to rest. This year's spring trip is really something. Resting his hands behind his head and leaning against the trunk, Yoru quietly complained to himself. To improve relations between pure and impure students, the school board had changed the usual spring trip, which used to be organized by class after the start of school. Instead, they selected a few students from each class and grade before school began, combining them into multiple mixed groups. Each group was led by 2 teachers to various locations for a spring trip focused on teamwork. You can't even skip it without a valid excuse. Is this really going to work? I should have faked an illness and gotten a doctor's note. As usual, Yoru started mumbling to himself again. With 20 minutes left before departure, Yoru finally finished moving everything. He was careful enough to bring along an extra tent, because he figured no one would want to share one with him. Afterward, Yoru went to the restroom to change into clean, dry clothes and wiped himself down to get rid of the smell of sweat. Fat people sweat easily, and after carrying heavy loads under the sun, his previous clothes were completely soaked. With about 10 minutes left, Yoru took out his Switch and began playing Pokemon. Soon after, he heard the teacher's whistle signaling assembly. He slung his backpack over his shoulders and walked over while still playing. The bus led by Mifagirasu was nearly full and about to depart. While checking the supplies, they realized a box of life jackets was missing. Just as Girasu was about to call for 2 students to retrieve it, she saw Yoru walking over leisurely, playing his game. "Excuse me, student. Wait a moment," Mifagirasu said with a slight frown as she jogged over. Why was he walking so slowly? Didn't he hear the whistle? Why wasn't he hurrying? Girasu hated this type of student the most. Girasu-sensei, is something wrong? Yoru shrank back, stealing a glance at the teacher in front of him. Her waist-length pink hair was neatly trimmed with braid-styled sideburns. She was tall and slender with flawless skin. Definitely a stunning beauty. "We're short 1 box of life jackets. Can you go get it?" Girasu said directly. "Sensei, I wasn't assigned to carry the life jackets." Yoru hesitated, wanting to refuse. He didn't want to go back and get all sweaty again. "I know, but right now I can't figure out who was supposed to bring it, understand?" Girasu's tone turned commanding. She looked at Yoru. He was holding a game console and didn't seem to have broken a sweat. The bus was about to leave, and he was still calmly playing games. She assumed he had been slacking off. She had been standing under the sun and was sweating from just a bit of movement. Everyone on her bus had helped with supplies. Who else had no signs of sweating? Only Yoru looked untouched, and he was a fat guy. Fat guys sweated easily. Girasu gave him a once-over. Chapter 3, Kasumijoka's Treasure Chest. Yoru swallowed nervously. He had long heard that Mifagirasu was a cold and strict teacher, difficult to approach. "Go now." Girasu's face turned cold. As an educator, she had to assert her authority. She thought this would finally make Yoru act. But he still didn't move. Girasu grew angry. She now believed Yoru wasn't just lazy, but also disrespectful. A troublemaker who ignored teachers. Did he treat her words like air? Seeing her face go completely cold, Yoru realized there was no avoiding it. Under Girasu's glare, he had no choice but to run back under the scorching sun to get the life jackets. Back at the warehouse, not knowing where they were stored, he searched the huge space until he was drenched in sweat. By the time he returned carrying the box, the bus had already left. Fortunately, there was another one. This one was led by Shizuka Hiratsuka, rumored to be a hot-tempered beauty. For some reason, she wasn't in the bus or nearby. Yoru loaded the box into the trunk and looked at the tightly packed bus interior, hesitating. Just the thought of stepping inside and drawing everyone's attention made him want to crawl into a hole. Not to mention, he wasn't even assigned to this group. Nervous, he stepped onto the bus. The moment he did, the cool air from the AC hit him. He shivered slightly and saw a few open seats. He figured taking one should be fine. He picked the nearest empty seat, holding his backpack tightly, and sat beside a girl. Seconds later, the girl beside him suddenly covered her nose and let out a small cough. Behind him, a boy spoke up. Ugh, what's that smell? So sour. You smell it too? Like sweaty sour stench. Gross. Why would you sit near the AC vent? Yoru froze. He had forgotten that he was once again drenched in sweat. With the AC blowing, the smell spread quickly. The students on this bus hadn't helped carry supplies. They were clean and sensitive to sweat odors. Though no one named him, the scattered complaints clearly referred to him. Feeling the stares, Yoru stood up stiffly and moved toward the back of the bus. A few rows down, he saw an empty window seat but didn't dare sit. That was where Kaguya Shinomiya, the icy beauty and heiress of the Shinomiya conglomerate, was. Even with 10 times the courage, Yoru wouldn't dare approach someone like her. He lowered his head and kept walking. At the very back, he found another empty seat. But the person sitting there had long, shapely legs wrapped in sleek black stockings, which made him freeze again. Kasumijoka Utaha. Can't sit here either. He mumbled to himself. To be honest, maybe it was because he'd been bullied by girls or hurt by rumors, but he'd grown a bit gynophobic. He didn't want to get close to any girl, let alone someone like Kasumijoka Utaha. Plenty of boys were on the bus, yet no one sat next to her. That said it all. Utaha gave him a sideways glance and recognized him as that disgusting fat guy who had seen her argue with Nariri. She coldly looked away. In the end, Yoru chose to sit on the floor in the farthest corner at the back of the bus. There were lots of bags piled up there, making it a tight fit. He had to spend some effort to clear out a small space. Sitting there, Yoru actually felt a bit relaxed. A while later, Shizuka Hiratsuka entered the bus with a cute mixed-race gyro girl who had blonde hair in a side ponytail and bright blue eyes, both carrying a big cardboard box. Sorry to keep everyone waiting. Driver, please depart, said Hiratsuka as she placed the box in the bus aisle. The side ponytail girl went straight to sit beside Kaguya Shinomiya. This group's spring trip destination was a private beach in Chiba Prefecture. The trip would take about 3 hours. Yoru curled up in the corner, enjoying the cool air conditioning. His whole body relaxed. Surrounded by the soft murmurs of conversation, he slowly closed his eyes. He didn't know how long had passed. A big bump in the road jolted Yoru awake. He yawned and groggily opened his eyes. The next second, his pupils shrank. Above Kasumijoka Utaha's head floated a dazzling golden treasure chest. Beneath it was a progress bar, currently at 0%. His first thought was that he must still be half asleep and hallucinating. He rubbed his eyes and looked again. The treasure chest was still there. Everyone else seemed completely unaware. That huge golden chest was clearly floating above Kasumijoka's head. I must be dreaming. Yoru pinched the flesh on his thigh hard. It hurt. This wasn't the dream. What the hell was that treasure chest? Yoru's mind went blank. His mouth hung open in shock as he dumbly stared at the chest over Kasumijoka's head. Combined with his chubby frame and sloppy face, he looked exactly like a perverted freak straight out of a movie. That treasure chest. What is it? Why can only I see it? Was it a gift from God out of pity? With a sharp snap, Kasumijoka shut the light novel in her hands. Her face darkened as she turned and caught sight of Yoru's disgusting expression. She had noticed several minutes ago that Yoru had woken up and was staring at her intensely. It gave her the creeps. Maybe it was a sixth sense, or just years of caution, but Kasumijoka had always been extremely sensitive to being watched. Even if someone stared at her from behind, she could sense it like she had eyes in the back of her head. She had already proven this once. Back when Yoru watched her arguing with Ariri. Wait a minute. Just as she was about to tell Yoru off, something clicked in her head. She remembered. Yoru wasn't even supposed to be on this bus. Why was he here? And he'd also seen her arguing with Ariri earlier. Kasumijoka's imagination ran wild. It was too much of a coincidence. Even now, Yoru was still staring at her. Her thighs. Like he was in heat? His mouth was hanging open, practically drooling. Was he fantasizing about her like some crazed freak? Kasumijoka suddenly thought. Chapter 4, The Fat Otaku's Instant Social Death. Do you like my legs? Kasumijoka asked coldly. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was icy enough to sweep through the bus like a frigid winter gust. The entire bus went silent, save for the hum of the engine. Everyone turned their heads. Only now did Shizuka Hiratsuka notice someone else sitting in the back corner. Huh? What? The dazed Yoru snapped out of it at the sound of Kasumijoka's voice, locking eyes with her. His chubby frame trembled. His throat visibly gulped down a mouthful of saliva. He looked extremely nervous. Like a thief caught red-handed. Seeing this only confirmed Kazumidjoka's suspicions. Yoru had been ogling and fantasizing about her. She had already been in a foul mood thanks to Airi, and now she was furious. You've been staring non-stop with that gross look on your face. What the hell's wrong with you? Kazumidjoka stormed over to Yoru with long strides, her face twisted in anger. She raised her foot and aimed a fierce stomp between Yoru's legs. Yoru, still too confused to react, instinctively flinched and squeezed his eyes shut. Thud. Kazumidjoka's black loafers hit the floor with force. She hadn't actually stomped on him. She just wanted to scare him. Even stomping on you would dirty my shoes. Kazumidjoka glared at Yoru, her chest rising and falling in fury. It was the first time she'd encountered such a disgusting and brazen fat freak. He dared to ogle her and fantasize about her in plain sight? She'd had plenty of boys secretly stare at her from a distance. She knew they would later talk about her body or compare her looks with other girls. She loathed that kind of behavior. But this was the first time someone had done it right in front of her, practically drooling. And now, the disgusting freak lying at her feet might have even followed her onto the bus. If he dared to stalk her, who knows what he'd do next. She didn't even want to imagine it. You could never be too careful. Only by acting firmly could she protect herself and teach him a lesson. Yoru, not feeling any pain, opened his eyes slowly, relieved. But soon his heart sank again. He realized. No, he was definitely being misunderstood. He lay on the bus floor, wanting to explain, but his teeth chattered so hard he couldn't get a single full sentence out. You don't have anything to say for yourself? Kazumidjoka asked, equal parts furious and slightly amused by his reaction. She gritted her teeth, her expression growing even fiercer. The boys on the bus looked at Yoru with mixed expressions. Shock, disgust, anger. And maybe even a bit of envy. Maybe they were envious of getting yelled at? The girls were united in their disgust and looked at Kazumidjoka with admiration for her boldness. Kazumidjoka had always had a strong presence at school. Back when she first transferred into Shuchin, she'd often noticed her shoes being tampered with or out of place. Eventually, she secretly staked out the area for days. One afternoon, she caught a third-year senior sniffing her shoes during class, right in front of many students, causing a school-wide uproar. The boy's family had some connections, so he offered an apology and compensation, but still got expelled. Kazumidjoka wasn't satisfied. She insisted on reporting it to the police. Only after the boy's parents came to apologize in person and the school board intervened did she finally relent. Rumor had it that boy had to transfer to some remote delinquent school in the countryside. I'm sorry. Yoru bit the tip of his tongue to calm himself down and finally squeezed out a sentence. Then he quickly glanced at the treasure chest that had gotten him into this mess. It was still there above Kazumidjoka's head. Clearly, he was the only one who could see it. But would it disappear? Just as that thought crossed his mind, the treasure chest vanished. His mind went blank again. He nearly blacked out on the spot. Shizuka Hiratsuka had been watching all along but chose not to intervene. She felt it was better to let Kazumidjoka handle the situation herself. I don't accept your apology. Kazumidjoka said coldly, her voice devoid of emotion. Yoru lowered his head even further, digging his nails deep into his palm, saying nothing. He had no way to explain. His only option was silence. He'd been misunderstood. Again. And again. Humphrey. Kazumidjoka let out a cold snort, her expression finally softening. She had achieved her goal. To completely socially annihilate Yoru, to teach him a hard lesson, and to protect herself in the process. Because Yoru had stalked her and fantasized about her, she couldn't help but wonder. What if he tried something worse? To say she wasn't afraid would be a lie. Only by scaring him off would he remember this and restrain himself. It could also deter other disgusting boys with ill intent. Deep down, Kazumidjoka had no sense of security. Yoru opened his mouth but shut it again tightly. It wasn't like that. It wasn't what she thought. Seeing her argue with Airi, getting on the same bus. Those were just coincidences. Drooling and fantasizing like some idiot? No. He had just been shocked by the golden treasure chest floating above her head and spaced out. Anyone would have done the same. He wanted to explain, but the fact was, he had indeed been staring at Kazumidjoka. And he couldn't talk about the treasure chest. No one would believe him. Bringing it up would only make things worse. What else could he do? He already feared women and hadn't had a normal conversation in years. Facing someone like Kazumidjoka, a girl so out of reach she induced fear and inferiority with just a glance. His brain almost shut down. And just like that, the misunderstanding was set. Unless one day Kazumidjoka could speak to him honestly, it would never be resolved. Alright, everyone quiet down. We're almost there. Hiratsuka Shizuka shouted, putting an end to the chatter in the bus. Yoru stayed silent. He knew his school life was officially over. He'd become nothing but a joke for others to laugh at. But then again, his school life was already at rock bottom. If only he were handsome. Maybe a few lies could have saved him? 2 tour buses drove one behind the other along a coastal road. Clear blue skies, deep blue sea, soaring seagulls. After turning onto a side road, the buses entered a wide lane with no other vehicles in sight. At the end was a top-tier private beach. The treasure chest disappeared again. Was it really just my imagination? Before long, Yoru pushed his gloom aside. As strange as it sounded, maybe he'd built up resistance from all the social deaths and misunderstandings he'd been through. While he was thinking that, he noticed something shocking. The treasure chest had reappeared above Kazumi-juka's head. He suddenly realized he might be able to control whether the chest appeared or not by will alone. Maybe it was bound only to him. And maybe, once the progress bar filled up, he could open it? What would be inside? Alright everyone, we've arrived. Time to get off. Hiratsuka's voice interrupted Yoru's thoughts. Chapter 5, Ariri, who looks down on others with her nostrils. Once the bus was empty, Yoru grabbed his luggage and hurried off. As he stepped off the bus, Hiratsuka stopped him at the door. What's your name? Kita.kami Yoru. He answered nervously. This was the teacher rumored to hit students when they stepped out of line. Hiratsuka nodded, pulled out a pack of cigarettes from her white coat, and lit one. Yoru's heart skipped a beat. Don't do that again. Staring at a girl's thighs non-stop. Hiratsuka said flatly, blowing out smoke. I did look at her, but I wasn't drooling over her thighs. Yoru stammered, trying to explain. Then what were you looking at? Why didn't you just say so earlier? Hiratsuka frowned and gave him a sharp look. Yoru opened his mouth but didn't know what to say. Alright, just don't let it happen again. Go. She said with a shake of her head. Yoru nodded lightly and quickly headed for the beach. But he couldn't help turning back to say sincerely, I really wasn't fantasizing about Kazumi-juka's thighs. Unfortunately, combined with his fat otaku face and aura, his words had zero credibility. If anything, he just looked like someone who hadn't learned his lesson. Oh? But Hiratsuka actually heard the sincerity in his voice. Because she understood men very well. Back in middle school, she'd once been followed by a creepy older man and nearly got assaulted. The trauma had left deep scars. To protect herself, she began learning brutal martial arts, observing male behavior, and trying to act like one of them. She naively thought, if I act like a guy, I won't be a target. That's why she developed her loud personality, love for shonen manga, cigarettes, and booze. It wasn't until she started working that her androphobia slowly improved. Because of all that, she understood men. Especially boys around this age. And could often guess what they were thinking. That same experience was also why she never found the right person. She'd been single since birth, never even held a guy's hand. Yoru went to get the extra tent he brought and dragged it to the edge of the boys' camp area under the blazing sun. All the other boys' tents were grouped together in a circle. Yoru stood out. Off to the side and clearly isolated. Luckily, setting up the tent wasn't hard. He took his time, and half an hour was enough. By then, news of his social death had already spread. As long as no one added exaggerated rumors, that was all he could hope for. That said, this private beach really was beautiful. Yoru thought to himself. Clear, blue seawater. Soft white sand. Long stretches of shoreline shaded by rows of massive coconut trees. In the distance was a large beach house with facilities for cooking, barbecuing, showering, or dining. This spring trip was meant for fun, after all. And this was just the first day. There was still sunset shell collecting, deep-sea fishing, snorkeling, forest hikes. But Yoru planned to stay in his tent the whole time. He wouldn't go out at all. Except to use the bathroom or shower. He brought enough food and water for several days. He had manga and games for entertainment. Just stepping outside for even a second made him uncomfortable. After checking the tent for any gaps, he crawled inside. It was spacious enough for two, but he had one all to himself. Everything inside was in order. Just as he was about to relax, a pair of slender white-stockinged legs passed by his tent. Both sides got startled. What are you doing? Ariri snapped angrily. She had just come up with a brilliant idea to get back at Kazumi-juka, only to forget it completely. Oh, it's you? Seeing it was Yoru, her expression changed instantly. She raised her chin, puffed out her little chest, crossed her arms, and looked down at Yoru with pure disdain and disgust. Yoru saw her expression and quickly apologized, retreating back into his tent. Disgusting fat creep. What a bad omen. Air chewed in frustration and stomped off. Seeing Yoru had triggered her again. Her mind involuntarily recalled a jun she had read not long ago. It started cute. A blonde twin-tail rich girl and her childhood friend in a sweet romance. Then the art style suddenly changed. A fat, sleazy man, who weirdly resembled Yoru in both body and hair, found out the blonde girl's secret, and the story twisted into NTR. The art was beautiful. Too realistic. Eri, pen name Kashiwagi Eri, was herself an H-gen artist and also a blonde twin-tail Ajawa-sama with a childhood friend she liked. The self-insert was too strong. The story made her sick, and her best friend and step-sister, Sagiori, teased her for it. She had finally managed to forget about it, and now Yoru had brought it all back. Thankfully, this was real life. Her secret would never be discovered. She would never have anything to do with someone as gross as that creep. Yoru stayed in the tent for a while, then peeked out after making sure Eri was gone to fetch his luggage. Today really sucks. He sighed while unzipping his bag. He made up his mind, from now on, he'd stay as far away from beautiful girls as possible. Especially girls like Eri, who looked down on him with that arrogant Ajawa-sama air. Yoru really couldn't stand them. Rustle. Yoru dumped out the contents of his travel bag. Sleeping bag, food, phone, manga. Huh? Did I grab the wrong book pouch by accident? Yoru suddenly muttered. A few foot fetish gins and some ultra-embarrassing hypnosis ones tumbled out of his bag. He immediately tossed them aside. He'd already read them dozens of times. The pages were worn out. After organizing his supplies, Yoru began eating lunch. Just then, a delicious smell wafted into his tent from outside, hooking him like a fish on a line. Under the shade of nearby coconut trees, 2 large iron pots were bubbling with food. Everyone had gathered around, holding bowls and plates. Students from both the pure and impure classes were chatting and laughing. It looked like they were getting along well. Hey, everyone come over and eat lunch together. Don't eat your own stuff. And those of you thinking of swimming, wait till the sun sets. After lunch, you're free to rest. Yoru sniffed the air hard, but went back into his little nest. The campgrounds were set up beneath wide patches of shade, with the boys and girls separated by about 20 meters. Accompanied by a salty sea breeze, Yoru dozed off until evening. He took a sip of water, crawled out of his tent to go use the bathroom. He noticed many people in swimsuits at the shore. Swimming, combing the beach, collecting shells, digging for crabs. Some had gone into the woods to gather firewood for a bonfire. Everyone was having a great time. Yoru finished up quietly and quickly retreated to his tent. His mind kept drifting back to the treasure chest above Kasumijoka's head all the way into the evening. He really wanted a shower, but there were limited stalls. He didn't want to run into anyone, so he decided to wait until after midnight. Suddenly, loud applause erupted outside. Yoru peeked his head out. The commotion reflected a massive bonfire. So they're having a bonfire party. Yoru muttered, knowing it had nothing to do with him, and laid back down, trying to nap. But he couldn't sleep. Outside, people were singing, playing games, giving introductions, telling stories. It went on until midnight, and then people began trickling off to shower. By the second half of the night, around 2 a.m. Yoru, with dark circles under his eyes, used his phone light to make his way to the shower house to clean up. Not long after he left, another beam of phone light flicked on. It flicked off again shortly after, then reappeared a few minutes later, bobbing faintly around the campgrounds. A while later, Yoru returned from the shower and noticed lights flashing near his tent. His heart skipped a beat. Was someone upset with him? Was someone going to mess with his tent? He immediately rushed back. Phew. Good, nothing happened. Probably just overthinking. Yoru yawned. The dark circles under his eyes screamed of exhaustion. He dove into his tent and closed his eyes. Chapter 6, Yoru did it. And my stockings and panties are gone? Inside their shared tent, Kasumijoka, her hair messy, clutched her head and screamed in panic. What's wrong? Beside her, Shinomiya Kaguya groggily opened her eyes, her expression blank as she looked at Kasumijoka. The two had been assigned to sleep in the same tent. The panties and stockings I took off last night. Gone. Kasumijoka's wine-red eyes widened as she inhaled sharply. Maybe I accidentally took them. Kaguya sat up and reached for her bag. If that's the case, then thank goodness. Kasumijoka frowned. She clearly remembered putting them away properly last night. Kaguya shouldn't have taken them by mistake. Still, if it was just a mistake, that would be the best-case scenario. Otherwise, it meant they'd been stolen. Rip. Kaguya unzipped her little bag. Kasumijoka didn't even dare breathe. Her hands clenched nervously, trembling slightly. At that moment, Kaguya froze, suddenly realizing something serious. They had been sharing this tent. If Kasumijoka's panties and stockings hadn't been taken by mistake, then someone had snuck into this tent last night. The thought made Kaguya bolt upright, chills racing down her spine, her hands beginning to shake. As the heiress of the Shinomiya family, even her photos couldn't be allowed to end up on other people's phones. If someone had stolen something personal from her too. Or secretly taken pictures of her while sleeping. Or worse. Shinomiya-san? What's wrong? Kasumijoka was startled by her change in expression. Kaguya quietly voiced the terrible possibilities she had just imagined. The two girls sat in silence, their faces growing colder and more furious by the second. Kaguya turned her entire bag upside down. But Kasumijoka's missing underwear and stockings were nowhere to be found. Kaguya's anxiety and anger were no less intense than Kasumijoka's. Could it be him? The two looked at each other and blurted out the same name with icy expressions. Excuse me, Shinomiya-san. Did something happen? A voice called from outside the tent. Hayasaka, already dressed, asked politely. Pretending to be unfamiliar with Kaguya, per their usual cover. Her tent was pitched right beside theirs, and she'd heard Kasumijoka screaming and all the rustling sounds, which immediately made her suspicious. Yes. Something happened. Kaguya replied calmly. At school, Hayasaka always acted like a Gyaru and maintained the pretense of not knowing Kaguya to help cover her activities. I'm coming in. Hayasaka lifted the flap and peeked in. She saw Kaguya with her hair tied up and Kasumijoka already wearing shoes. Both girls looked deeply upset. Huh? What's wrong with you two? Hayasaka glanced at Kaguya, puzzled. My panties and stockings from last night were stolen. Kasumijoka said flatly, not even lifting her head. Hayasaka froze for a few seconds. After a glance from Kaguya, she immediately understood. This was very, very serious. If the thief had only stolen Kasumijoka's panties and underwear, he might get away with his life. But if he dared to mess with Kaguya... Hayasaka's body twitched. A wave of suffocating tension washed over her. I haven't noticed anything missing. Yet. Kaguya subtly added. This is awful. Did the thief leave any clues? Hayasaka asked, feigning concern, though her eyes narrowed slightly. There were no clues. But I know who it was. Kasumijoka's wine-red eyes burned with fury. A certain name and face flashed in her mind. An overweight, disgusting otaku. She had immediately thought of Yoru. Only someone like him would dare to go this far. Who else could it be? She regretted not zipping up the inner flap of the tent last night. Otherwise, this wouldn't have happened. It was that. Kitakami Yoru. Kaguya said with a terrifyingly cold expression. I agree. It has to be him. Kasumijoka bit her lip, then glanced at Kaguya. Having a powerful heiress like her on her side was a huge advantage. Their conversation wasn't even quiet. Some curious girls nearby overheard. And soon, like locusts, the rumor spread across the entire beach camp. Kasumijoka-senpai's panties and stockings were stolen? That's so scary. There are only so many people here on this private beach. Who would dare do that? Hey, you don't think it was that disgusting fat creep from yesterday, do you? Wasn't his name Fat Kawa or something? Him? Wow, he's got guts. A dozen or so girls followed Kasumijoka and Kaguya in a group, chattering as they headed straight for the boys' tents. About 20 meters away. Some boys were already up washing up. They saw the girls marching over and were stunned. Quickly waking their still sleeping tent mates. When they arrived at the boys' camp, Kasumijoka stood with her arms crossed, giving the area a cold, commanding scan. Which tent is Kitakami Yoru's? She asked coldly. That one over there. A bespectacled student stammered nervously, pointing at a tent that clearly stood out from the rest. What happened this time? Why is Kasumijoka-san going after that fatty again? They say someone stole her panties and stockings last night, and she thinks it was that Yoru guy. What? Hey! Get up already. No way, someone was really that bold? This explosive gossip once again spread like wildfire throughout the boys' camp. Even the ones who were dead asleep from staying up late were slapped awake by their tent mates and quickly told the story. Meanwhile, Yoru was still curled up in his tent, fast asleep under the weight of heavy black high bags. He had no idea that the entire spring trip group had gathered right outside his tent. He's sleeping in his own tent far from the boys' camp, and after what happened on the bus earlier, he's definitely the prime suspect. Hayasaka said seriously while hidden in the crowd. Her analysis made complete sense and was immediately accepted by the group. Especially Utaha, who was already furious and had assumed the worst about Yoru. Sleeping alone in a tent? Definitely suspicious. He stole panties and stockings, then holed up alone far away. Calculated and disgusting. How can someone so gross even exist? He should just die. Gross. Chapter 7, The whole family sinks into Tokyo Bay. Make way, the teachers are here. Garasu and Hiratsuka Shizuka pushed their way through the crowd with difficulty and walked up to Utaha and Kaguya. They already heard the full story from the students. Garasu looked quite anxious as she questioned Kaguya, while Hiratsuka focused on maintaining order. Without hesitation, Utaha threw open Yoru's tent flap. She saw Yoru still fast asleep, black eye bags heavy under his eyes. In an instant, she imagined this as evidence of him staying up all night from the excitement of committing the crime. Wake up! Utaha didn't hold back. She grabbed a ming lying nearby and tossed it at Yoru's body. The sleeping Yoru jolted awake, blinked, and rubbed the spot where he'd been hit. Garasu-sensei, could you please move aside? Kaguya stepped up beside Utaha and coldly peered into the tent. Eiku. What's going on? Yoru sneezed, then noticed the two girls glaring at him. His heart began to race in fear and confusion. What did I do this time? Why is Shinamiya looking at me like that too? And why are there so many people standing outside my tent? Get out! Utaha ordered sharply. Yoru had no idea what was going on. But as someone who feared women, he froze from the tone in Utaha's voice. His body instinctively curled up in defense. Half stumbling, half crawling, he scrambled out of the tent. A pitiful sight. Right into the glaring sunlight and rows of slanted silhouettes surrounding him. He sat on the ground, looking like a criminal awaiting judgment. What? What is this? In his mind, images of the times he had been falsely accused flashed. A terrible feeling grew in his gut. Utaha and Kaguya just stood there staring at him in silence. But the crowd behind them was buzzing with chatter, filled with accusations and insults directed at him. Hayasaka watched Yoru coldly, perhaps already wondering whether to seal him in concrete or dump his family into Tokyo Bay. And don't doubt it. If Kaguya had really been violated or harmed, depending on the severity, this wasn't just about Yoru anymore. Hiratsuka looked on with mixed emotions. Suspicion, sympathy, and deep disappointment. Of all people, he had to provoke the heiress of the Shinamiya family. One of the most powerful conglomerates in the country. She frowned and sighed inwardly. Now, everyone believed Yoru had stolen Utaha's panties and stockings. All the circumstantial evidence pointed to him. Except Yoru himself. He was completely clueless. No. What are you talking about? You think I stole Kazumi-juka's panties and stockings? No. That's not true. I didn't do it. Only now did he realize what people were accusing him of. He panicked and scrambled to his feet to explain. But his legs were shaking so badly they couldn't support his weight. As he tried to stand, he fell forward. Desperately wriggling, he ended up collapsing at Garasu's feet. Thud. His massive weight slammed into the ground, making his knees feel like they'd shattered. He let out a muffled groan of pain. Many onlookers burst into laughter at how ridiculous he looked. Kitakame, if it was you, just admit it and hand them over. Garasu said. If not, I'm calling the police. She took a step back and looked down at Yoru with a trace of disgust. Originally, she'd just thought of him as a disobedient, mischievous student. She hadn't imagined he'd be a pervert who stole girls' underwear. A troublemaker and a criminal are completely different things. And criminals didn't deserve kindness. No, it wasn't me. Yoru suddenly raised his head and shouted angrily. But yelling wasn't going to change anything now. Why didn't Garasu believe him at all? Why didn't she even give him a chance to explain before threatening to call the police? If the police got involved, things would escalate beyond repair. Even now, you still want to deny it? Utaha sneered. You've stalked me, spied on me. Is it really that far-fetched to think you're the culprit? She folded her arms with confidence. You don't have proof. Yoru said, tears welling up in his eyes. How can you say that without evidence? This wasn't like the usual bullying he endured. Yoru understood that if he didn't fight back now, once the police were called, no one would believe him, and he'd never get another chance to defend himself. His life would be over. Being expelled, losing the tuition money. None of that mattered. But his parents' hopes, the stain on his record, getting sent to juvenile detention. That would ruin everything. What he didn't know was that this wasn't just about Utaha. He had also offended Shinamiya Kaguya. A terrifying heiress. If he knew that, he might have broken down on the spot. I'll search the tent myself. Utaha declared, stepping forward. Fine. No, wait. Yoru gathered his courage to agree, then immediately regretted it. There were so many embarrassing things in his tent. If Utaha found them, he'd die of shame on the spot. Oh? Utaha laughed coldly. Now she was even more convinced he was hiding something. This is my private space. You don't have direct proof that I stole anything. Why should you get to search my tent? Yoru tried to suppress his fear, using all his strength to say it. And once he did, it felt like all the air was sucked out of his body. He couldn't breathe. Utaha frowned, about to reply, when Kaguya interrupted. I said, search it. Kaguya took a step forward, lifting her head slightly to meet Yoru's eyes. She was petite, but Yoru felt like he was being crushed under her gaze. Against Utaha, he could barely muster courage. But against Kaguya, he knew what kind of monster she was. A heiress standing at the pinnacle of national power. If she got upset, it wasn't just his own life at stake. His entire family could be buried. She didn't even have to speak. There were plenty of people eager to curry favor with her. Maybe. Fear. Confusion. Helplessness. Panic. Yoru squeezed his eyes shut in despair. A single tear rolled down his cheek. Why were these women treating him like this? He hadn't done anything wrong. Was this the rich people can never be wrong effect? The next second, Yoru dug his nails deep into his palm, forcing himself not to cry. These fucking bitches. Chapter 8, No Mouth That Can't Be Open Move. Utaha ordered coldly. She was certain. Yoru had stolen her panties and stockings. Only someone like him had the guts to do it. But what if you don't find anything? Yoru said, pain shooting from his palm as he stood in her way. If you don't find them, then what? Are you going to say I hid them somewhere else? And then what? What happens to me then, Kasumijoka Utaha? Yoru shouted back with all he had, finally fighting for himself. This was the first time in Yoru's entire life that he had mustered up even a shred of courage. And he used it all. Just to prove his innocence. You're still trying to deny it? Utaha hesitated briefly, then sneered coldly. So that's it. You hid the stuff in advance, and that's why you're acting all smug? You. Why can't it be that? It's just that. Yoru tried to defend himself, stammering helplessly under Utaha's pressure. His tongue felt tied in knots. His hands flailed as he tried to find the right words, racking his brain in panic. He had planned what to say. But the moment grew too tense. And he forgot everything. He just couldn't hold on to the point he wanted to make. What do you think, Hayasaka? Kaguya turned to the girl beside her and asked in a low voice. Well, Kaguya-sama, if we're speaking in terms of probability, there is still a slight chance he didn't steal the panties and stockings. But it's fine even if we don't find evidence. There are always ways to pry open someone's mouth. Hayasaka stroked her chin in thought for a few seconds before replying. If gentle methods didn't work, there were always harsher ones. Lie detectors, psychological drugs, even torture. All viable options. Hayasaka considered them silently. Still, she believed without a doubt that Yoru was the culprit. It wasn't unusual for physical evidence to be missing. It could easily be hidden or destroyed by fire. Let's wait a bit. Hold on a moment. Hiratsuka Shizuka suddenly said, puffing on her cigarette and squeezing through the crowd. She stepped between Yoru and Utaha, separating the two. Ha. Utaha, don't push him too hard yet. Let him speak first. Hiratsuka said while exhaling smoke. Yoru saw this and eagerly nodded, using the pain in his hand to keep himself focused, breathing deeply to calm down. Fine. I'll hear what kind of excuse you've got. Utaha said with a sneer, stepping back in disgust. You too. Don't rush. Take your time. Hiratsuka sighed inwardly. She couldn't stand to watch anymore. Seeing how Yoru couldn't even speak clearly, she had to step in. Thank you, teacher. I'm okay now. Yoru nodded hard, his heart filled with gratitude as he looked at Hiratsuka. At least she was giving him a chance to speak instead of immediately attacking him like Garasamifo. What were you going to say? Hiratsuka stubbed out her cigarette and looked at Yoru, then continued on her own. Were you going to say? Why must the culprit definitely be you? Couldn't it be another boy, who saw a good opportunity and knew no one would suspect him, so he boldly did it? Because you'd be the perfect scapegoat. Couldn't it be a jealous girl who hated you, wanted to mess with your life, wanted revenge? Yoru's eyes widened with excitement. He almost bit his tongue. Hiratsuka had basically said everything he wanted to say. Yes, that's exactly it, Hiratsuka-sensei. Why can't these possibilities be considered too? You know as well as I do that plenty of girls at school are jealous of you, and lots of guys have a crush on you. Some people even offer high prices for your panties and stockings. Don't those count as motives too? Yoru raised his head and boldly met Utaha's gaze. Facing his determined eyes, Utaha hesitated for a second and took a deep breath. She began to consider what Yoru had said. Indeed, there had been rumors of people paying insane prices for her panties and stockings. She knew that. And it was also true that some girls, especially ones from Shuchin Academy, Didn't like her and would occasionally cause trouble. But that doesn't clear your name. Yutaha replied, her voice slightly softened but still stern. Kaguya turned and exchanged a glance with Hayasaka. An unspoken, mutual understanding. Kaguya wasn't all that concerned with who stole Yutaha's underwear. What she cared about was, who the culprit was, whether they had taken pictures of her, or done anything to her. Yoru's response caused a bit of wavering in both Yutaha and Kaguya. But the crowd outside wasn't having it. Neither the boys nor the girls could sit still. Because Yoru had just shifted suspicion onto them. Hey, you disgusting fat creep. What the hell are you saying? Kasumijoka-senpai is my idol. Who would want to hurt her? Fat bastard, you were drooling over her thighs before, and now you want to act innocent? Innocent act, seriously? I've never heard of anyone offering high prices for her underwear. Kasumijoka-senpai, don't be fooled by that pig-faced pervert. He must have prepared this whole excuse in advance. He's predicting your predictions. Look at how he pretended to be clueless earlier. It was all fake. He's a damn actor. He must have hidden the evidence somewhere, betting on the fact that you've got no proof and can't do anything. The crowd exploded again. Outraged boys and girls alike took turns shouting their accusations and wild theories at Yoru. To them, Yoru looked like the criminal. And no matter what the suspect says, no one believes them. I think we should just call the police. Garasu finally said in frustration. No. That's the last resort. Hiratsuka shook her head and glanced sideways at Yoru. In this kind of case, the police might not be helpful at all. They'd probably just gloss over the whole thing, especially since it involved someone like Shinomiya Kaguya. Even if Yoru was innocent, he'd likely be treated as the scapegoat or get a lifelong criminal record. That stain would ruin him. Not just getting expelled from school, but even future jobs would be impossible. His life would be completely destroyed. If he wasn't the real culprit. Maybe Yoru's sincerity had moved Hiratsuka a little. Off to the side, Yoru stood silently in front of his tent. While keeping an eye on Yutaha, he also listened intently to the teacher's conversation. When he heard Garasu still wanted to call the police, he panicked again. But hearing Hiratsuka speak up for him filled his heart with gratitude. Aside from his parents, no one had ever genuinely cared for him like this. Fine. Garasu opened her mouth, then looked away from Hiratsuka and turned to Yoru. She took a step forward and stood directly in front of him. Her tone and expression were cold, her eyes filled with open disgust. Yoru, if you did steal Kasumijoka Yutaha's belongings, then hand them over. To Garasu, if Yoru was innocent, why was he so afraid of the police? Wouldn't letting them handle it be better? Only criminals feared the police, right? In cases of harassment and theft, these were serious crimes. Of course the police should handle them. Chapter 9, Found the Evidence. Garasu-sensei. Yoru's expression was extremely bitter. Why did she insist on targeting him? Just then, Yutaha stepped in front of him and stared directly into his eyes. I'm still going to search. If I don't find anything, I promise not to blow this up. Fine. Yoru nodded firmly, then added, but only you. And you can only search inside the tent. You can't take anything out. He remembered all the embarrassing stuff he had inside. If Yutaha found those books, he'd die on the spot. Letting her see them was as bad as letting the whole school see. Once the agreement was made, Yoru stepped back into his tent. Yutaha frowned slightly but followed him in. The tent wasn't too small. 2 people inside didn't feel too cramped. Yutaha scanned the interior before finally looking at Yoru, who was crouched in the corner. Disgusting. She muttered, then squatted down and started rummaging through the mess. Her voice was low, but Yoru heard her. He clenched his fists tightly. Then let go. He sighed deeply in his heart. This might be the only time in his life he'd be alone with a girl like her. How cruel. Russell. Yutaha began searching his luggage bag thoroughly, occasionally glancing at Yoru to watch his reaction. Seeing how he stayed relatively calm, she wavered slightly again. After searching the bag, she moved to his sleeping bag and food supplies. Several minutes passed. Yutaha's expression grew a little dark. Nothing. She muttered to herself. In her mind, she wondered, did he hide it somewhere else? Not in the tent? She glanced at Yoru, then looked away. He was wearing just a t-shirt and shorts. No place to hide anything. That left just the manga pile and the gaming console. Yutaha kept one eye on Yoru while sweeping aside the manga with her hand. The next second, Yutaha froze, her eyes locked onto the so-called pile of manga. It wasn't manga at all. They were all gensai? Explicit ones filled with naked cartoon girls. Just one glance made Yutaha blush furiously, her breathing quickening. That. Can you hurry up? Yoru bit his lower lip and urged her on impatiently. What are you in a rush for? Looking at stuff like this. So disgusting. Yutaha seemed startled and angrily looked up. This is my privacy. Yoru paused, hesitating. Though, in truth, there was more he didn't dare to say aloud. He thought Yutaha was so beautiful and well-developed that she must have had many boyfriends behind the scenes. Maybe she had already been explored thoroughly by some playboy, and the stuff in those jinchai couldn't even compare to the things she'd done. Yeah. That's what Yoru believed. A bit envious, wondering who she had ended up with. Other people don't look at these things as disgustingly as you. Yutaha quickly flipped through them, her face slightly red, making sure Yoru hadn't hidden any stolen items among them. Hypnosis, common sense modification, blackmail by hidden cameras. What? What is all this? Yutaha pursed her lips tightly, her legs clenching unconsciously as a mix of shame and anger spread across her face. Yoru noticed everything. But he wasn't feeling good either. Outside the tent, Kirisu and Hiratsuka were maintaining order, stopping the students from gossiping and discussing how to handle the situation. Kaguya and Hayasaka were whispering to each other. Hayasaka, what if we don't find any evidence and can't confirm the culprit? Even if there's no evidence, we can still tell if it's him. If it turns out not to be him, then we'll investigate someone else. I just had someone start remote monitoring all the students' phones. If your photos show up, we can immediately identify the culprit. If not, if there's no trace of your photos, then based on psychological profiling, many perverts like to take photos of their crimes. So you might not have actually been harmed. Let's hope it's just a girl's petty revenge. Hayasaka sighed inwardly. There was still a lot to do. She'd have to track and monitor Yoru, that damn fat otaku, to fully rule him out as a threat. It was exhausting just taking care of Kaguya-sama. What a headache. Just then, there was a stir among the crowd, followed by a girl's shout. I found Kasumijoka-senpai's stuff. Having found nothing inside the tent, Yutaha immediately darted toward the commotion. A girl in the crowd held tightly to a pair of black tights with a corner sticking out. Several girls surrounded her, and Ariri was nearby, yawning as she watched. These are mine. Yutaha stepped forward excitedly, confirming it. All male students, turn away and avert your eyes. Want a fist to the face? Hiratsuka barked from outside. The girl handed Yutaha the personal item, and she carefully put it away. Further back, Hayasaka quietly observed Yoru as he stepped out of the tent. The two had once been in the same class for a year, but Hayasaka had never cared to learn anything about him. Her only impression was, a gloomy, fat loser. And, no girl would ever like someone like him. Let's get a DNA test on the item. Hayasaka thought to herself. This situation was getting messier and messier. Yoru was 99% likely the culprit, but there was still that 1% chance it was someone else. They couldn't even be sure if the perpetrator was targeting Kaguya. Stealing Yutaha's panties and stockings might just be a diversion. After all, even the average person knew how terrifying the Shinomiya family was. Hayasaka quietly walked back to Kaguya and whispered something in her ear. Meanwhile, Yutaha, having put away her belongings, thanked the girl and began asking questions. The girl explained that she had just been watching the commotion in the crowd and, while being jostled, noticed that the sand under her feet felt off. When she crouched down and brushed it away, she discovered the item. The spot was close to Yoru's tent, but also just as close to other boys' tents. That didn't prove Yoru was the culprit, but it slightly reduced suspicion. If it really was Yoru, would he hide it there like that? Could it be someone doesn't like me and is trying to get revenge or make me suffer? That thought flashed through Yutaha's mind but was quickly dismissed. Damn it. She bit her lip in frustration. She still suspected Yoru. She couldn't let it go. This lack of direct evidence, only circumstantial, made her feel so suffocated. So helpless. Was this how it was going to end? Kasumijoka-senpai. The crowd parted, and Kaguya stepped forward. Shinomiya-san, are you here to help me? Yutaha looked at her with a glimmer of hope. Chapter 10, The Treasure Chest Progress Bar Shuchin Academy. Hiratsuka, Yutaha, Kaguya, and Yoru walked together. Yoru followed at the very back, silently staring at the tips of his shoes. Just moments ago, Kaguya had whispered something to Yutaha. Now the four of them were headed straight from Chiba back to Tokyo, returning to Shuchin. They were currently walking toward the principal's office. What would happen next was anyone's guess. Fortunately, the police hadn't been called, and his parents hadn't been informed. Though Yoru knew his mom and dad would unconditionally believe in him and fight for him, he didn't want to drag them into trouble again. He'd already let them down enough. He couldn't even lose weight and just kept worrying and burdening them. That was the only pride Yoru had left. Soon, the group arrived at the principal's office door. Hiratsuka knocked gently on the heavy door. A middle-aged man's voice came from inside. Principal Adolf. She opened the door and stood aside, letting the others enter first. The office was spacious, decorated in an old European academic style, with sunlight pouring in. Yoru followed last and saw the principal, Adolphe, sitting on the sofa. An elegant Frenchman, or so he fancied himself. "Come in." Hiratsuka urged from behind and closed the door. In truth, she had no idea how Kaguya intended to resolve this. "Please, take a seat." Principal Adolphe motioned to the chairs, his eyes lingering briefly on Kaguya and Yoru. Utaha chose to sit beside Kaguya, her expression somewhat relieved. Kaguya had promised her they'd find the culprit. Since she was involved now too, they shared a common goal. Let Kaguya handle it. Next was figuring out how to deal with the biggest suspect. Yoru. Yoru felt nervous, sneaking glances at the principal as he sat awkwardly far away. "I've been briefed on the situation. Let's all speak frankly," said Principal Adolphe seriously. "I request the school to expel Katakami." Utaha spoke up immediately. Though she didn't have solid evidence Yoru was the culprit, she firmly believed that Yoru had ogled her thighs and gotten aroused. That much, she considered undeniable. She wanted to use that point to push for Yoru's expulsion. Yoru opened his mouth in shock, about to argue. If he got expelled from Shuchen, all his parents' sacrifices, cutting expenses, paying high tuition, would be meaningless. His family had given so much for him. And it would all be for nothing. "Keep your mouth shut." Kaguya shot Yoru a cold glance. She gave him no chance to defend himself. Yoru swallowed his words, his expression darkening. He reminded himself to stay calm. A student like that being expelled. "I have no objection. It damages our school's moral standards." Kaguya raised her hand in agreement. Yoru silently stared at her, furious but powerless to speak. With Kaguya leading the charge, his fate was basically sealed. He wanted revenge. No, he couldn't even argue with her. The gap between them was just too vast. Like an ant trying to defy an elephant. If she was displeased, even his whole family might suffer. This wasn't a fantasy Jin. He couldn't just hypnotize her, rewrite her common sense. Or seduce her into falling in love with him, then cruelly toy with her feelings. Yoru dug his nails deep into his palm, sucking in cold air, legs trembling nervously. Wait. Something was off. A flash of clarity hit Yoru, and he looked toward Utaha. Above her head, a golden treasure chest slowly materialized. And beneath it, a progress bar had increased slightly. That same treasure chest was the cause of all the misunderstandings, the whole chain of events. Yoru couldn't be wrong. "I've come to understand the entire situation," said Principal Adolphe after a long moment of silence. Yoru was snapped out of his thoughts. He opened his mouth but said nothing. "I'll leave the final decision to you," Kaguya said as she glanced at Yoru. She had the power to kick Yoru out of school. Or even erase him from this world. But for now, she was only acting as a student, a victim and vice president of the student council. She hadn't invoked her authority as the Shinomiya heiress. The final verdict still rested with Principal Adolphe. The Shinomiya family code did not allow arbitrarily overstepping one's status or breaking the rules. Yoru held his breath. His heart was racing out of control. His face was ashen. Principal Adolphe's gaze landed on Yoru as he elegantly crossed his legs. Utaha frowned and began listing Yoru's crimes. Kaguya followed up with supporting jabs. In her eyes, even if Yoru wasn't the culprit, he was still a disgusting fat creep who stared at Utaha's thighs. Expelling him from Shuchen seemed perfectly justified. Though the whole thing lasted only a few minutes, for Yoru, it felt like he was being tortured in hell. Hiratsuka sat quietly to the side, visibly conflicted, but in the end, she spoke up for Yoru in a more neutral tone. Creak. Yoru forced his twisted, tear-contorted face to stay composed as he shut the principal's door behind him and quickly walked out. But as soon as he stepped outside, the dam broke. Overwhelmed with grief, he clutched his mouth and sobbed uncontrollably. His chubby body trembled with each sob. He tried to stifle the sound with his hand, but saliva kept slipping through his fingers. Still, the result was better than expected. There'd been no police involvement. His parents wouldn't be informed. The school wouldn't issue a public notice. But gossip? That couldn't be stopped. The rumors would spread regardless. Principal Adolphe didn't expel Yoru outright. Instead, he imposed two conditions. First, Yoru must not be involved in any negative incident going forward. If he was, he'd be expelled immediately, regardless of whether it was a malicious report. Second, by the end of the school year, Yoru's overall grades had to place him in the top 30 of his grade. If not, he wouldn't be allowed to return next semester. The first condition had been proposed by Principal Adolphe and was nearly settled. But then Kaguya suddenly added the second condition. A nearly impossible task for Yoru. Shuchen's total score factored in both academics and physical education. Yoru's grades were at the lower end, nearly rock bottom. As for given his obesity, he'd never earned a single point in gym class. Even if he studied and worked as hard as he could, others would be doing the same. His starting point was already miles behind. His classmates were already high achievers. Why should they be beaten by someone like Yoru? Why should Yoru be allowed into the top 30? And more importantly, with grades included. Something he had zero chance of improving. His overall score would be dragged down hard. Utaha stepped out just then and was startled by the sight of Yoru bawling outside. Seeing his miserable state gave her pause. Chapter 11, The Resolve for Revenge. Utaha hesitated for a moment, then frowned and looked away, muttering with disdain, "Stay out of my sight from now on. You're disgusting." Kasumijoka. Utaha. Yoru forced himself to stop crying and gritted her name out between clenched teeth. His fists clenched like sandbags. His jaw trembled as he glanced back toward the principal's office. The heavy door blocked his view. And then, Kaguya Shinomiya. Rage and hatred surged within him. If his emotions could ignite, the flames would consume everything. Huff. Yoru loosened his blood-red fists and took a deep breath, stepping away from the principal's office. It was lunchtime. After finding a hidden spot on campus to cry his heart out and dry his tears, Yoru finally picked up his backpack and left. He was afraid he'd lose control and cry on the way home. That would be too humiliating. He especially didn't want to cry at home and worry his parents. Yoru lived in northern Shinagawa, near the border of Minato Ward. His commute usually took half an hour by train. But today, feeling emotionally wrecked, he decided to walk home, carrying his bag through the bustling city and tall buildings, letting the wind clear his head. Minato Ward had beautiful scenery, especially near Shuchen. Tokyo Tower, the largest waterfront park in Japan, equestrian fields. It took Yoru an hour and a half to walk home. His house was a luxurious two-story single-family home with a spacious yard. At this hour, his parents hadn't returned from work yet. So Yoru was relieved as he unlocked the door and stepped inside. Back in the warm comfort of his home, Yoru switched shoes at the entryway. And once again, tears started falling. But after crying so much earlier, his eyes were dry. Only a few stray tears slipped down his cheeks. Sniff. Sniff. He sniffled as he climbed the stairs to his bedroom. Throwing himself onto his soft bed, Yoru buried his face deep into the mattress, clenching his fists. He kept telling himself to be strong. Don't cry. Be strong. After squeezing out a few more tears, he forced the sadness down and began thinking. Mafagirasu. The one who aggressively threatened to call the police and ruin his life. Kasumijoka Utaha. The one who cursed him, insulted him, and tried to get him expelled without any proof. Kaguya Shinomiya. The one who, for no reason, targeted him and made things worse. Those three fucking bitches. Yoru's heart swelled with hatred. He suddenly raised his face from the pillow. His features were twisted with fury, his eyes bloodshot and bulging. Thud. Out of nowhere, he slammed his fist into the bed. The bed frame shook violently from the impact. AHH. AHH. Yoru shot upright and began furiously pounding the mattress with both fists, releasing his fury. Why won't anyone believe me? Why does everyone suspect me? Damn it. Damn it all. His screams echoed through the room, muffled only by the thick walls. Thankfully, the house was well built and soundproof. No one outside could hear. After venting for a while, his thoughts still a tangled mess, Yoru sat up cross-legged on the bed. Suddenly, he remembered something. Last night, when he returned from the bathhouse, he saw a faint light near his tent. Was that the real culprit? The idea flashed through his mind. At the time, he'd thought someone was about to mess with his tent, so he ran back right away. The person must have panicked at being discovered and hastily buried Utaha's panties and stockings in the sand. The discovery site was indeed very close to Yoru's tent. Wait. Yoru's brow twitched as he realized something critical. If the culprit's skull had been Utaha's underwear, they wouldn't have buried it. They could have just run off with it. That would have been much faster than burying it and then escaping. So that meant the culprit didn't want to keep Utaha's underwear as a trophy. Otherwise, they wouldn't have gone through so much risk only to bury it afterward. At the very least, that much was clear. Thinking about it, maybe the culprit wasn't even male? Yoru sat upright, now fully serious. Then the motive was just as I suspected. To frame Kasumijoka Utaha. Or, to frame me? Yoru's eyes widened as he exhaled a cold breath. The more he followed the strain of thought, the more confident he became. He could even boldly claim. It must be true. Yoru cursed himself for panicking earlier and forgetting this crucial detail. He leapt to his feet. But just as he raised a leg, he slumped back down again. Utaha would probably just assume he made this all up after the fact, trying to deflect suspicion. Frustrated, Yoru pounded the bed again and kept thinking about the culprit's motive. To get revenge on Utaha? On him? Or both? So, who could it be? Who had a bad relationship with Utaha and wanted to retaliate? Maybe someone jealous of her, who thought it would be hilarious to hand her intimate items over to the most disgusting fat loser at Shuchin. Yoru? Damn it, don't let me find out who you are. Yoru's face twisted once again into a terrifying mask of rage. That damn culprit. Don't let me find out who you are. If you're a man, I'll make you regret ever being born male. If you're a woman, I'll make you experience being a whore. Right now. That unknown culprit, whose gender and motive remained a mystery, had already been marked for death in Yoru's heart. His hatred for the culprit had even surpassed his hatred for Utaha. The culprit. Kasumajoka Utaha, Kaguya Shinamiya, Mifagirasu. I will never forgive you. Just wait until I get the chance. Yoru's hoarse voice sounded like the creaking of a dried-up tree being stripped of its bark. Eerie and chilling. Not now. A gentleman's revenge may take 10 years. At worst, once his parents were gone, he'd have nothing left to worry about. He was already just a useless fat shut-in who couldn't survive without his mom and dad. He'd never known much happiness anyway. When the time came, what would he have to fear? Might as well fight back. Yoru recalled a certain Korean webtoon. Chapter 12. Dad's secret time passed, and it was now evening. A Lexus E300 pulled into the garage at Yoru's house. A slightly chubby middle-aged man, with some resemblance to Yoru in his features, stepped out. Beside him was a mature, stylishly dressed woman carrying an overstuffed shopping bag. Kitakami Toyotani and Kitakami Megami arrived at the entryway and began to change shoes. Instantly, they spotted Yoru's shoes. Aren't these Yoru's shoes? Megami asked her husband. No matter how tall, fat, or disgusting Yoru was in other people's eyes, no matter how disliked he was outside, in her heart, he was always her precious son. He was supposed to be in Chiba for the school trip for a few days. Why's he back today? Toyotani immediately realized something was off. I'm going upstairs to check. Megami couldn't sit still anymore. She ran inside without even taking off her shoes. Upstairs, she found Yoru's bedroom door closed and gently knocked on it. The knock was soft, but urgent. Yoru? Why are you back so soon? Megami asked with a gentle voice. I wasn't feeling well. Didn't want to do the whole trip, so I just came home. Came Yoru's slightly raspy reply from inside. Yoru thought he was doing a good job hiding it. He'd drunk lots of water to soothe his throat. Even to himself, he sounded completely normal now. But not to a mother who cared deeply. His voice is hoarse. Like he's been crying. Megami silently withdrew her hand, glanced at Toyotani who had just come up the stairs, her eyes brimming with concern. Toyotani opened his mouth but said nothing, simply lowered his head in guilt. After a long pause, he said bitterly, It's my fault. Our son inherited my constitution. Maybe even worse. Both parents knew well. Yoru had suffered another blow, had been bullied again. They felt ashamed, powerless, and deeply heartbroken. All they could do was try to give him the best life possible as a way of compensating. It's all your fault. Back then you were all slim, muscular, stupidly handsome. I was totally fooled. Megami suddenly lost control and lightly punched her husband in the chest. In university, Toyotani had been the undisputed campus heartthrob. There were plenty of good-looking guys, but none on his level. He stood alone at the top. His perfect looks had instantly caught Megami's eye. Someone already used to being courted by handsome men. In front of Toyotani, even the hottest guys looked dull. Once they fell in love, deeply, Megami learned the truth. Toyotani had an easy-to-gain fat body type. In fact, Toyotani used to be a full-on fat guy. As an adult, he had half his stomach surgically removed, underwent multiple rounds of liposuction, took long-term medication, and trained intensely. Only then did he become that muscular hunk. But once his body built resistance to the meds, and as he got older, the weight started creeping back. I didn't think our son would inherit all of it. And even worse. Toyotani sighed again, full of guilt. This is all on you. Megami was still uneasy about Yoru and shot another glare at her husband before hurrying back downstairs. Dinner time. The table was full of dishes, but most were low oil and low salt. Toyotani and Megami sat across from each other. I get it. Yoru's voice came first, and the door opened. The couple relaxed slightly but kept their eyes fixed on their son. Wow. Everything looks so good. Yoru entered the dining room and smiled at the spread. He seemed completely normal. But the faint redness in his eyes didn't escape Megami's notice. Wash your hands before eating, she said softly, heart aching. Okay. Yoru quickly headed to the sink. But he forgot one thing. His palms were full of tiny wounds from digging his nails into them earlier. The moment the icy water hit, the sting was brutal. Yoru nearly cried out in pain but forced himself to finish washing and sat at the table. Good thing Mom and Dad didn't notice, he thought, relieved. His stomach was empty, but he had no appetite. He ate quietly, chewing rice and dishes without much taste, occasionally glancing at his parents and savoring this moment of peace. If they found out I could get expelled from Shuchen, Mom and Dad would be devastated, he thought as he chewed. The tuition at Shuchen was so high. If he didn't attend, Mom could buy better clothes, higher-end skincare. Eat more, Megumi said, placing a piece of beef on Yoru's plate. Yoru nodded and ate it. Then, after some hesitation, he put down his chopsticks. Dad, Mom. He looked at Toyotomi and Megumi, his voice uncertain. If something's bothering you, just say it. Toyotomi replied, setting his bowl down. I want to move out. Rent a small apartment near school and live on my own. Yoru hesitated, but he said it. And felt incredibly guilty. His parents had spent almost all their savings to donate their way into Shuchen. They paid sky-high tuition every semester, all for him. But he was useless. Couldn't even take care of himself, kept getting bullied. And now he needed their support again. What a failure. But Yoru really wanted a private space to force himself to study harder, lose weight, and work toward making the top 30 in his grade. To avoid being expelled. He wasn't confident. But it was the only way. To his surprise, his parents exchanged a glance. And agreed without hesitation. Yoru nodded firmly, but instead of joy, tears welled up again. He hated the culprit and the three bitches even more. Especially the culprit. Yoru wanted to clear his name, avoid expulsion from Shuchen, and then seek revenge. Assuming he was thinking along the right lines, there were many possible suspects. It would be nearly impossible to track them. Like finding a needle in a haystack. So he didn't hold much hope. But the revenge had to happen. Yoru's eyes lingered on his parents again, and he fell silent. He couldn't drag them into this. Couldn't let them worry or be disappointed. Otherwise, he would have gone all out back in the principal's office. That meant the only breakthrough left was the mysterious treasure chest. Something clicked in Yoru's mind. He shoveled down a few last bites and excused himself. The dining room fell quiet again. Yoru's definitely been crying. His eyes are red, his voice is hoarse, and his palms are injured. Megumi's heart broke as she spoke to Toyotomi. Sigh. Let him have some space. Toyotomi said. He had noticed it all too. Only the one trying his best to hide it. Yoru was still clueless about how obvious he had been. What if? Megumi's eyes turned red again. No. He's still too young. Toyotomi cut her off firmly. Megumi wanted Yoru to follow his path. Get a surgery, take those special weight control meds, and work out hard. Then he'd lose weight too. And when he did, he'd be unbelievably handsome, even more than Toyotomi was in his youth. Not just as handsome, but surpassing him. Megumi was a natural beauty herself, so with complementary genes, Yoru would only be even more attractive. Then he wouldn't be bullied anymore. In fact, girls would line up for him. But surgery was damaging. Those meds were also harsh on the body. Toyotomi's balding and health issues had nothing to do with genes. It was stress, overwork, and late nights. Besides, Yoru wasn't even an adult yet. Over the years, Toyotomi had hidden every single photo of his handsome younger self, afraid that Yoru might see what he used to look like. And be tempted to take that same extreme path to lose weight. But still, Megumi couldn't help but speak again. Chapter 13, basically an angel. The next day, the sun was already high in the sky. Yoru crawled out of bed with dark circles under his eyes, dragging his heavy, overweight body. His lower half ached from last night, but a cold shower would fix that. Ah. Ha. He yawned loudly. He'd spent the entire night wide awake, thinking things through. He had nearly drifted off in the second half of the night when suddenly, the image of the golden treasure chest above Utaha's head came to mind. The progress bar on the golden chest had gone up. Yoru ran through countless possibilities in his mind and eventually concluded. It seemed like just being near Utaha would slowly increase the progress bar. Forget being near her. Even seeing her from a distance makes me want to take a detour. That damn bitch. Yoru knew it was impossible. He clenched his fists, his face twisted in frustration. After venting his anger, Yoru quickly got out of bed. He had things to do today. As he opened the bedroom door and headed to wash up, he noticed something on the floor by the door, a thick stack of 10,000 yen bills and a small bag. Inside were eye drops, throat lozenges, band-aids, and ointment. Yoru froze, then bent down and gently picked it up. Mom. Dad. He put the things away and went downstairs to wash up. At this hour, he was home alone. After washing up, He found the breakfast his mom had left for him and sat down at the table. He ate mechanically, chewing tasteless food as he scrolled through his phone. School would start again in a few days. Yoru needed to find a place to live before then. He had a few small requirements for the apartment, preferably close to school, with nice scenery nearby, and access to a free public park. He didn't need anything luxurious. Just a small studio apartment. Something cheap. He figured somewhere near the border of the Minato district would work. After breakfast, he took some cash and went out. Standing at the door, he looked up at the gloomy sky and frowned. Taking a deep breath, he looked himself up and down. Still the same fat body. But something felt different. Maybe his mindset. He now carried a pressure and hatred he couldn't ignore. On the way out, Yoru avoided girls as much as possible. He didn't want any trouble. If something happened and word got back to Shuchin, he could be expelled. This one won't work. Rent's way too expensive. Yoru muttered as he boarded another train. Time passed, and soon it was noon. He had already visited several apartments. Some had good layouts but poor locations. Others had decent locations but weren't quite right. The one he had just seen had a great layout and location, but it was too expensive. Close to an office area he didn't even need. Next one. Border between Meguro River District and Minato. Close to Meguro Station. There's a big historical landmark park nearby. It's a free tourist spot. Tokyo Metropolitan Art Museum is there too. But the address the landlord gave is kind of vague. Yoru sat in the far corner of the train car, talking to himself out of habit. Once he arrived, he headed straight for the residential area near the historical park. In this area, commercial and residential zones were clearly separated. The apartment listing didn't give a clear address. Only general directions and a few landmarks to look out for. Yoru spent nearly half an hour wandering around. He came out of a nearby convenience store with a bottle of water and grumbled, "Who the hell is this landlord? Can't even get in touch by phone. Guess I'll keep looking." He muttered, grateful at least that it was overcast. If it were sunny, he'd be drenched in sweat. The neighborhood was spacious, clean, and well planned. There were roads for cars, bikes, and pedestrians, and plenty of greenery. It was lunchtime, so the place was quiet. Not a soul in sight. Just as he turned a corner, a soft slap hit his chest. A small girl with long golden hair and bright blue-gray eyes walked right into him. She was incredibly cute. Yoru glanced at her and, for some reason, felt an unexpected warmth and familiarity. He quickly looked away and moved to walk along the wall. So weird. Why can't I find it? Gabrielle muttered as she looked at her phone. Sensing Yoru's glance, she looked over. So fat. She was mildly shocked, then completely unbothered, turned the corner, and walked away. Foreign girl. Yoru muttered, then resumed his search. 15 minutes later. Yoru leaned against a utility pole along the sidewalk and gave up. Forget it. On to the next one. So tired. Phew. Just then, a gentle voice called from behind him. "Ah. Sumison. May I ask for directions?" Yoru turned around, surprised, and saw the same cute, foreign girl from before. She was politely leaning forward, smiling sweetly, and looking right at him. What? Yoru was stunned. For the first time in his life, such a beautiful girl had spoken to him. Even if it was just for directions. "Do you know this place?" Gabrielle showed her phone to Yoru. "Huh. Wait, you're looking for this apartment too? Are you trying to rent it?" Yoru looked at her in surprise and showed his own phone. "You too?" Gabrielle smiled so warmly that Yoru was momentarily dazed, as if her smile could sweep away the gloomy skies. Yoru nodded instinctively. He hadn't expected her goal to be the same. "I came from over there," Gabrielle said thoughtfully, explaining where she had already searched. They compared notes and realized that between the two of them, they had covered most of the area already. Now, they had a better idea of where to go. "Since we're both looking for the same place, want to search together?" Gabrielle looked up at Yoru curiously. His huge size was fascinating to her. She was new to the human world and found everything interesting. It'd also be faster with two people. "What?" Yoru thought he misheard. He stared at Gabrielle, suspicious. "Come on. We're almost there," she said and turned around. Yoru stood frozen beside the utility pole, staring at Gabrielle's back in disbelief. Such a kind, cute, and polite foreign girl. She was like a pure angel. Most local girls would avoid him like the plague. In Japan, society wasn't exactly friendly to shut-ins like him. Especially not for high schoolers, a group buzzing with hormones and youth. He had heard that girls in other regions could be even more brutal. After a moment of hesitation, Yoru followed Gabrielle silently. She occasionally asked him questions, clearly unfamiliar with Japan. Yaru answered them one by one. Before long, they found the apartment and the landlord. The landlord turned out to be a slightly scatterbrained elderly lady, which explained the vague address. Chapter 14, The Girl and the Stray Cat. They opened the door to the apartment and stepped into a small entryway and bathroom area. The floor was covered in warm-colored hardwood. It was clean and comfortable even barefoot. A bit further in was a bright and simply furnished living room with a small, plastic-covered couch and a wall-mounted TV. The living room led to a bedroom through a door. It was small, with a bed, wardrobe, and desk. The bed was by a bay window. Yoru really liked that design. The other side of the room had a separated kitchen and shower area. Outside was a small balcony with a washing machine. It was compact but had everything. The location was great, the apartment was good, and the price was cheap. Yoru chose the unit at the far end of the second floor and signed the contract with the old landlady. He even gained a cute blonde neighbor, Gabriel, who lived right next door. After signing the contract, the landlord mentioned that there were still plenty of vacancies. If Yoru referred anyone, she'd give him a rent discount. Then she left. Yoru and Gabriel stood on the second floor balcony, about 2 meters apart, in front of their respective doors. "By the way, I still don't know your name." "I'm Tenma Gabriel White," she said cheerfully, introducing herself. Since she had just arrived in the human world and wasn't familiar with much yet, and considering they'd soon be neighbors and got along well just now. "Oh, I'm Yoru, Kitakami Yoru," he said nervously, giving Gabriel a glance as he introduced himself. "You can just call me Gabriel," she replied with a polite and adorable smile. "All right." Yoru felt like he was in a dream. He quickly changed the subject. "By the way, Gabriel, did you come from abroad to study here?" "Yep, I just transferred to the nearby Shuchen Private Academy," she said, nodding slightly as she recalled. "I definitely can't say I'm an angel. I have to keep my real identity hidden," she added silently to herself. "Shuchen? So we're schoolmates." Yoru was surprised. Then he realized he was able to talk normally with a girl and unconsciously raised his eyebrows in shock at himself. "A schoolmate? That's unexpected." Gabriel nodded, then asked in a gentle tone, "Yoru, want to go furniture shopping together? I just got here and I'm not too familiar with things around here." Her big blue-gray eyes stared at Yoru as she spoke. He couldn't bring himself to refuse and nodded stiffly. They could probably catch some deals if they shopped for small appliances together. Of course, Yoru wasn't delusional enough to think Gabriel might actually fall for a fat shut-in like him. He'd heard that foreigners were more tolerant of fat people. Apparently, it was true. He arranged a time with Gabriel. That afternoon, Yoru didn't stick around but returned home. He told his parents about the apartment, stayed the night, packed his things, and had his dad drive him back. The next day, Yoru and Gabriel went out shopping again. There were a lot of things they needed. From rice cookers, pots, and a fridge, to tissues, cold medicine, and other miscellaneous necessities. Whenever the two of them walked together, they'd often draw strange looks from passers-by. Yoru looked like a wild boar from the mountains, while Gabriel was an elegant princess. The two together seemed like an odd mismatch. Thankfully, no one called the cops thinking a fat shut-in had kidnapped a cute foreign girl. Gabriel didn't seem to mind. Or maybe she didn't even notice. Yoru felt comfortable around her. She was polite, graceful, and very cute. Over the next few days, the two went shopping together a few more times and became more familiar. Tomorrow was the first day of school. That afternoon, the sky remained gloomy. The weather forecast said it would be rainy season for a while. It wasn't unusual for the morning to be sunny and then pour by noon. Yoru and Gabriel had lunch together outside and returned to their apartments. "Let me check. What haven't I bought yet?" Yoru looked at his fully stocked fridge with a strange sense of accomplishment. To be clear, the fridge was filled with clean, high-protein, low-fat foods, fruits that helped metabolism, and quality carbs. "Got the yoga mat, vitamins, joint supplements, desk lamp," he muttered to himself while recalling. "Oh right, I still haven't bought review books." Clapping his hands, he turned and rushed out. For the past few days, he'd been stressed about that requirement to rank in the top 30 of the grade. He hadn't been sleeping well. Moving out was so he could focus on both studying and losing weight. Even though he knew the odds were low, Yoru still wanted to try. Thinking of that, he clenched his fists again, a fierce expression flashing across his face as he thought of Shinomiya Kaguya and Kasumijoka Utaha. Review books weren't sold nearby. He had to take 2 train stops to find a large bookstore and buy them. After that, he remembered he didn't have any seasonings at home. He only had salt and oil. So on his way back, he stopped by a convenience store to pick some up. And also bought dinner. Just after stepping out of the store, the sky darkened and it started drizzling. Yoru hadn't brought an umbrella, so he could only pray the rain didn't get worse and ran toward the station. Luck wasn't on his side. The rain got heavier. There was nowhere nearby to take cover, so he was forced to hide under a roadside tree. This day just keeps getting worse. Crouching under the tree, he shrank back as the rain blew in sideways and soaked his clothes, leaving damp spots and a chilly feeling. He looked around for a better tree to hide under, but none were ideal. Then he spotted a black cat perched in the branches of a nearby tree. The rain and dark skies made it hard to notice at first. Perfect? Yoru quickly shielded his books and ran over. Standing under the tree, he looked up. The cat was round and fluffy, with smooth dark fur. Though its coat was mixed with some dirt, its eyes were a striking amber color. It stared down with an air of dominance. Looks just like me. Yoru laughed, glancing at his own belly. The plump black cat watched him cautiously. Yoru decided to coax the fat little cat down and take a better look. He pulled out the dinner he'd bought from the convenience store. A fresh sushi box. He took out a slice of salmon and waved it enticingly at the cat. The cat stood up in its nest. Likely a large bird's nest it had claimed. And its amber eyes followed the fish closely. Come on down. Fresh salmon here. Yoru stood on tiptoe, waving the fish. But the cat was wary. It meowed twice but didn't budge. Phew. Yoru gave up, tossing the salmon slice onto the sushi box and placing it below the tree. Then he made up his mind. He climbed the tree. It wasn't that tall. Climbing it wasn't too hard in theory. But it was his first time climbing, and with his weight. Good thing no one was around. If someone saw him clinging to a tree like that, they'd definitely get the wrong idea. After several failed attempts, he finally managed to pull himself up, clinging tightly to the trunk. Only to immediately fall back down with a thud. Meow meow. The cat meowed twice, almost mockingly, and jumped down. It landed perfectly, snatched the salmon, and began eating. Gotcha! Yoru shouted with excitement and quickly grabbed the cat by the scruff of its neck. The black cat struggled for a moment, then looked at Yoru. And stopped. Seeing it no longer resisting, Yoru gently petted its head. He realized it was a female, with a tiny tag around its neck hidden in the fur. Must be someone's pet that ran off. No wonder it's not that scared of people. Holding the black cat in his arms, Yoru was about to check the tag when a soft, youthful girl's voice called out behind him. Startled, Yoru twisted his waist with difficulty and saw a cute girl in casual clothes standing behind him. She held an umbrella and a long net. Chapter 15, I'm so jealous of Utaha-senpai. The girl had a bob haircut and simple clothing, standing in front of him with her umbrella and net. Oh, is this your cat? Yoru froze and instinctively held out the chubby cat toward her. Seeing the net, he assumed the cat was hers. It's not mine. Since you saved it, I'll leave it to you to take care of Kitakami-kun. Kato Megumi said calmly. That line stunned Yoru. He blurted, how do you know my name? Classmate. He was certain he'd never seen this girl before. Because during the field trip a few days ago, we were in the same group. Megumi said plainly. Wait, that means... Yoru froze. If they were in the same group during the trip, then she must have seen everything. Including the issue of him trying to steal Kasumizuka Utaha's panties and stockings. He lowered his head, not wanting to say another word. He held out the black cat again. You were the one who spotted it first. You really don't want it? Nope. Someone in my family's allergic to cat fur. I just wanted to rescue it. Megumi shook her head lightly. The rain grew heavier. Yoru didn't respond. He lowered his head and hugged the plump black cat tightly. Since she didn't want it, he would adopt it himself. Living alone was lonely enough. He didn't have any friends. Having a round little cat like himself didn't sound too bad. The black cat didn't struggle, but its amber eyes darted around cautiously in his arms. Plap. With a soft sound, Megumi opened her umbrella and stepped forward to stand beside Yoru, holding it above both of their heads. The umbrella was just big enough to shelter two people, shielding them from the increasingly heavy wind and rain. If you need, I can walk you to the station or find a place for you to wait out the rain. She shortened the net and tucked it under her arm. Her delicate hand extended outside the umbrella, rain falling on her pale palm as the wind gusted by. Really? Yoru's eyes widened. He looked at the adorable girl in front of him, hardly daring to believe it. Why not? Megumi tilted her head slightly, as if the question confused her, then gestured for him to follow. Oh okay. Yoru held the chubby black cat with one arm and carried his shopping with the other as he stepped under the umbrella. Megumi silently raised the umbrella higher and led the fat shut-in away from the tree and into the rain-soaked street. After walking a short distance, Yoru couldn't help glancing at her adorable profile. Finally, he asked, why are you walking me to the station? Aren't you scared of me? Don't you find me gross? During the field trip, all of them thought I was the one who stole Kazimijoka Utaha's panties and stockings. Megumi turned her head to look at him, then said after a pause, I saw you trying so hard to climb the tree just now. And honestly. Yoru listened intently, waiting for her to continue. In the next second, Megumi suddenly chuckled, as if she remembered something funny. Hee, the way you fell down was kinda silly. She quickly realized her slip, covered her mouth with her hand, and looked away, slightly embarrassed. Yoru swallowed nervously. Her gentle, adorable smile was tinged with a shyness that made his heart flutter. Still. What was her real reason? He grew a bit anxious but also bashful, unsure how to press her for an answer. Megumi finally composed herself and said seriously, because I think someone trying so hard like you doesn't look like a criminal. Besides, Kazimijoka-senpai never found any real evidence, right? Thank you. Yoru stared at her as if trying to memorize her face, expressing his gratitude sincerely. A quiet sense of joy welled up in his chest, along with something indescribably warm. Someone still believed in him. This girl. She's amazing. Actually, there was another reason Megumi chose to believe Yoru. Lonely people attract lonely people. The same kind understands each other best. Despite her innocent and calm appearance, Megumi had her own unspoken struggles. Her name was plain, she had no distinct personality, and her presence was so faint she was often overlooked. Even after half a year. Or even a full year. In the same class, many classmates still couldn't remember her name. It was something that troubled her deeply. No need to thank me. It's not your fault in the first place. She replied. I've actually been thinking of tracking down the real culprit. I have a small clue. Yoru said, looking out at the blurry street ahead. I was just too nervous to connect the dots at the time. Megumi turned toward him, intrigued. That night, past midnight, I went to shower in the cabins. Everyone else was already asleep. When I came out, I noticed a phone light flashing near my tent. I thought someone was trying to mess with me or destroy my tent or something. So I rushed back. I probably scared them off because the light disappeared right after. I didn't notice anything suspicious at the time. That might have been the culprit. Or maybe just someone who got up to pee. He spoke while observing Megumi's reaction. Surprisingly, her brows gradually furrowed, and doubt crept into her eyes. Uncertainty? Suspicion? Do you know something? Yoru asked anxiously. Sorry. I just remembered something. It's nothing. Megumi said apologetically, looking a bit troubled. Yoru's expression clearly dimmed. He sighed and lowered his head. Of course. Finding clues or the culprit wouldn't be that easy. They walked a little further, and Megumi finally escorted Yoru to the station. Before parting, Yoru stood at the station entrance and hesitated before asking her name. Today, he really was thankful for her help and trust. My name's Kato Megumi, Kitakami-kun. She replied, a bit awkwardly. The reason she hadn't told him earlier was because she felt it was unnecessary and too much trouble. After all, she figured he wouldn't remember her anyway. Maybe tomorrow or the day after, he'd forget she even existed. Thank you, Kato-san. Yoru nodded, then boarded the train with the cat and his luggage. Bye. Yeah. I really envy someone popular like Kazimijoka-senpai. Kato turned away, holding her umbrella as she sighed softly. Compared to the radiant Utaha, she was just a little nobody. Chapter 16, Let's Call You San-san. Thanks to Megumi walking him to the station, Yoru got home safely. The rain had stopped by the time he was on the train. The fat cat in his arms was a little restless. But not too bad. This wasn't a completely wild cat. The tag around its neck suggested it had once been someone's pet. It might have been abandoned, or simply wandered off and couldn't find its way home. Such cats were usually much less wary of humans and could be tamed easily. After changing shoes and closing the door, Yoru set the chubby cat down and let it explore freely. But surprisingly, the cat just stood there at the entrance, staring at him with wide eyes. Not running, not hiding. Yoru didn't have time to deal with the cat for now. He carried the bags inside while the cat quietly curled up at the entrance. After putting away the review books and seasonings, he returned and picked up the chubby cat. You already know you've got room and board covered, huh? Is that why you're not struggling or resisting? Meow meow. The cat meowed a couple times but didn't protest as he grabbed it by the scruff. Yoru brought the cat to the shower room, placed a basin of water on the floor, and gently set it down. The cat didn't resist. Instead, it jumped into the basin on its own and shook its body. Hang on. Let me see what your name is. Yoru chuckled, reaching out to pet the cat's head. Meow. Its amber eyes went wide and round, and it swatted his hand away with a paw. You can raise me, but don't touch my head. still a bit wary of strangers. So Yoru tried a different tactic. One hand held down its belly, and the other reached for the tag around its neck. The tag was brass, dirty and heavily worn. SHK. He rubbed the grime off with his fingers. The information engraved on it was mostly illegible. A string of numbers. Looks like a phone number, but most digits are blurred. And this? What's this character? Above the numbers, there was a tiny character. Barely visible after the wear. Only one character remained, 3. Is that your owner's name? No. Maybe it's yours? Yoru muttered, stroking the cat's fur thoughtfully. Then he remembered. It was Wednesday today. And it was 3 p.m. How about I call you San-san? Sounds good? San-san? The plump cat purred happily under his big hand and even squinted its eyes in contentment. San-san is a little girl kitty. Yoru picked up the showerhead and some body wash, giving San-san a full bath. She was smart and seemed to know the human wouldn't hurt her, so she obediently let him wash her and even seemed to enjoy it. But after the bath, the little rascal ran off right after being blow-dried and refused to be touched again. Guess I'll take a bath too. Yoru muttered as he turned on the bathroom heater and took off his clothes. Staring at his naked reflection in the mirror, layers of fat stacked on his body, he gritted his teeth again. The only comfort was that at least something about his body was genuinely impressive. Just like the contrast between his figure and everyone else's. Kasumadoka Utaha. Shinomiya Kaguya. Yoru slammed his fist into the wall again. After taking a shower, Yoru walked into the living room. He hadn't rested at all over the past few days. Nearly all his time had been spent buying furniture and figuring out how to decorate a living room he liked with the least amount of money. The cozy living room and its layout were nothing like when he had first rented the place. San-san lay quietly curled up in the corner of the sofa. Yoru decided not to disturb it, went to the kitchen to grab a bottle of sugar-free, zero-fat oolong tea, then sat down beside it and observed it silently. To be honest, wanting to raise a cat had been a sudden whim. Yoru didn't know much about raising cats. He just knew they shouldn't eat human food, and they could eat fish and chicken. They also needed regular vaccinations and deworming, which was beneficial to both the cat and the owner. Other than that, he wasn't sure. The house didn't have the right setup for those things yet, so he planned to take San-san to a nearby pet shop to get everything sorted when he had time. Knock knock knock. There was a knock at the door, followed by Gabriel's polite voice from outside. Wearing slippers, Yoru hurried to open it and found Gabriel standing at the doorway. She was short, only reaching his chest. I'm still pretty tall. I hit 176 centimeters last year, way taller than most guys my age, he thought to himself while curiously looking at Gabriel. Kitakami-kun, can I ask you something about school? School starts tomorrow, and since I just got here, there are lots of things I don't understand. Gabriel smiled a little awkwardly and twirled her golden hair with her finger. Ah, sure, no problem. Do you want to come in? Yoru blinked his big eyes. Yes, thank you. Gabriel darted inside without hesitation. Yoru. Forget it. Gabriel really is dense and not afraid of me at all. He glanced at the petite and cute Gabriel, then looked at himself. Wasn't she worried he might do something bad? Shaking his head, Yoru went into the kitchen, grabbed a drink and some fruit, and returned to the living room to serve her. He came back to find Gabriel holding San-san in her arms, gently nuzzling it with her face. Kitakami-kun, is this your cat? When did you get it? Gabriel asked curiously. San-san didn't seem wary of the stranger at all. It let Gabriel cuddle it and even meowed occasionally. I picked it up recently. It's only friendly with you, still a bit cautious around me. Yoru let out a quiet sigh. Even a female cat hated him? Oh, that's easy to fix. I'll make an exception and help Kitakami-kun out a little. Just a tiny bit of divine power. Heaven won't find out, Gabriel whispered to herself. In the Shinomiya family estate, inside Shinomiya Kaguya's room. The blonde maid with the side ponytail, Hayasaka, held a stack of documents without making a sound. She silently appeared behind Kaguya, startling her. Hayasaka? Kaguya frowned. Sorry, Kaguya-sama, you were too focused. I've dug up the information. Hayasaka said with a mischievous smile. I won't read it. Just give me the summary. Kaguya wasn't interested in the background of a fat otaku. There was nothing suspicious. The records show that Yoru had been involved in similar suspected incidents in elementary and middle school, but nothing could be confirmed. There's nothing strange about him. No suspicious DNA was found either, though we can't completely rule out the possibility. He might be the culprit. Or not. Hayasaka skipped over some unnecessary details. The file contained incredibly detailed information on Yoru and his entire family. Even their underwear sizes, online shopping history, and browser records from the past year. Everything had been investigated and thoroughly examined. Privacy. As a human being, privacy was essential. And now it was all laid out in front of Kaguya and Hayasaka without a shred of restraint. It's pretty much certain that you weren't harmed. Hayasaka concluded. Chapter 17, Ariri's Odd Behavior Thursday. It was the opening day of Shuchin Academy, and unusually, the weather was beautiful. Sunny skies, gentle breeze. High school girls full of youthful energy could be seen everywhere. In trains, cafes, on the streets. Yawn. Ariri walked alone through the grand gates of Shuchin, yawning. Her dark circles were visible, so her makeup was a bit heavier than usual to cover them up. She hadn't been sleeping well lately due to some minor troubles. Her condition was off. She had even nearly fallen while turning a corner on her bike. Although her father was a diplomat and her family background was distinguished. Her British lineage, the Spencer family, was a top-tier noble house that had produced a prime minister. She didn't like special treatment. Ariri had attended public schools for elementary and middle school. Only in high school did she transfer to Shuchin. Unlike many of the other girls who had drivers, Ariri always came to school on her own. Since it was the new student season, there were many first-years around, curious about Shuchin, looking around and chatting like tourists in a palace. Ariri just found it annoying. She wanted to finish registration and go home. Look, isn't that Ariri-san? Ariri-san. While she was walking, two girls from the art club ran up behind her. Good morning. Ariri forced a smile, but immediately yawned again. She quickly covered her mouth. After all, she had always kept a cool image. Fortunately, these two girls were familiar faces. Ariri-san didn't sleep well, huh? Said the bun-haired girl. Good morning, Ariri-san. The long-haired one greeted. After some small talk, the three walked side by side. Seeing Ariri distracted and sleepy, the two girls started chatting on their own. Did you hear? During the spring trip a few days ago, Kasumijoka-senpai's panties and stockings were stolen. I heard. At first it was just a rumor, then someone posted it on the Shuchin forums and it went viral. The admin deleted the post, but it was too late. It had already spread. Yeah, and I heard the culprit is this guy named Yoru, a second year like us. A total fat creep. Walking beside them, Ariri paused slightly and quietly listened. Worse, someone anonymously offered 1,000,000 yen to buy the stockings Kasumijoka-senpai had worn. The bun-haired girl said with disgust. Ugh, so gross. I don't know what some guys are thinking. Perverted and disgusting. The long-haired one agreed with a look of revulsion. Someone also said they want to beat him up. Others are jealous of him. It's revolting. By the way, do you know how the school's handling this? It's serious enough to get expelled, right? Not sure? Wait, Ariri-san, weren't you in the same spring trip group as Kasumijoka-senpai? The bun-haired girl turned to Ariri curiously. You were there too, right? You must know something. Huh? Lost in thought, Ariri was startled and shook her head stiffly. I don't know anything about that. I'm not interested either. You're asking the wrong person. She replied, turning her head. Her eyes, however, subtly watched their reactions. That's a shame. If it were up to me, he'd be expelled. Just thinking about it makes me sick. Yeah, and he should be arrested. Everyone should know. I'd even have it published in my family's paper. 1,000,000 copies. The bun-haired and long-haired girls excitedly continued chatting as they walked into the school. So, has he been expelled yet? I don't think. It's that serious. Ariri cautiously asked. The girls didn't notice her tone. Even if they had, they wouldn't have cared. Ariri-san, you're too kind. Expulsion is the least he deserves. But, isn't there no solid evidence he's the culprit? Ariri weakly countered. Oh come on, it doesn't matter. That fat creep is finished anyway. The long-haired girl said, stretching her arms. How is he finished? Ariri widened her bright blue eyes, her cute face filled with curiosity and a hint of urgency. Haha, obviously. The long-haired girl laughed and sighed. She looked regretful but was clearly enjoying herself. Think about it. He's a gross fat otaku. No one likes him. He stole Kasumijoka-senpai's panties and stockings. How can he even show his face at school? Even if he does, everyone hates him. Girls and boys. He's doomed. One insult, one shove from every person, and he won't be able to take it. That feeling of being hated by all, stripped of dignity. He'll definitely drop out. Haha, and then his life will be over. The bun-haired girl added. Thump thump thump. Ariri's heart pounded wildly. That might be the best-case scenario. Maybe he already couldn't handle it. That kind of mental pressure. He might become schizophrenic or something. Yeah. Aren't there a lot of middle-aged office workers who jump in front of trains? It wouldn't be surprising if he couldn't take it and suddenly killed himself. Suicide is so common in our country. Too many people imitate it. If you're going to suffer anyway, maybe it's better to just end it early. Suicide is. That's a bit. Ariri took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling, wanting to say something. But her voice was too quiet, and she slowly fell silent again. The bun-haired girl and the long-haired girl were getting more and more worked up and didn't notice anything strange about Ariri. A while later, the three of them parted ways beneath the school building. Today was the first day of school, so there were no classes. But they had to register, attend the opening ceremony, and collect new textbooks and uniforms. This would probably last until noon before they could go home. There were no classes in the afternoon. Classes would officially start tomorrow. Chapter 18, Second Year Class C in Yoru's apartment living room. Po. 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 Wearing a sweat-wicking workout shirt, shorts, and shock-absorbing running shoes, Yoru collapsed breathlessly onto a yoga mat after finishing a set of mountain climbers. Meow meow. The fat cat San stared at him curiously with large amber eyes and walked over. I'll feed you in a bit. Don't be so impatient. Yoru said with a chuckle as he stroked the cat that had come over on its own. San immediately showed an expression of enjoyment, squinting its eyes, stretching its body with its back arched. Yesterday afternoon, after Gabriel left, Yoru remembered feeding San a bit of fish. This chubby gluttonous cat no longer seemed afraid of him. It acted very friendly and even initiated contact. Maybe it was tempted by food? Yoru withdrew his hand and muttered to himself as he climbed up from the floor. Seeing it wasn't too late and that Gabriel hadn't come to find him, he decided to do one more set of planks. For someone with his body weight, the most important thing was to control his diet and avoid high-impact aerobic exercise. Being so heavy, running and jumping rope were hard on the knees and could cause permanent, irreversible damage. Actually, Yoru wasn't lacking in weight loss experience. He had lost weight several times before. His most successful attempt saw him lose over 20 kilograms. But even then, he was still considered fat. No matter how hard he tried after that, he couldn't lose more. That feeling of going to bed hungry every night was too unbearable. Eventually, he gave up and gained it all back. He forced himself to hold a plank for 2 minutes before collapsing to the floor again. After resting for a while, he got up and tidied up. His weight loss plan was strict. Full dietary control. 30 minutes of cardio in the morning, an hour of cardio and strength training in the evening. Strength training was essential. If someone like him lost weight without building muscle, the loose skin would end up sagging horribly. After finishing his morning workout, Yoru showered and made himself breakfast. A bowl of high-fiber oatmeal, low-fat milk, 1 egg, and some fresh fruit. After eating, he gave San a bit of chicken breast and gave the round cat a thorough petting before heading out. He planned to take San to a pet clinic for vaccinations and deworming later if he had time. After checking that the door was locked, Yoru knocked on Gabriel's door so they could head to school together. Since their place was close to school, just 2 train stations away, they weren't in a rush. Such nice weather. On the train, Gabriel looked through the carriage window, feeling the warm sunlight on her body. Yoru sat nearby, 2 fist widths away from her, browsing Shuchin Academy's campus network on his phone. I got placed in second year class C. And the homeroom teacher is Hiratsuka-sensei? Yoru was a little surprised and secretly pleased. He resented the unknown culprit, Utaha, Kaguya, and Garasu so much that he was all the more grateful to Hiratsuka. Hiratsuka had not only stopped Garasu from calling the police, but also spoke up for him in the principal's office. Yoru was someone who remembered kindness. He would never forget Hiratsuka's help and would find a way to repay her. He wondered to himself. What might she need or want? Gabriel, you're in first year class A. Snapping back to the present, Yoru turned to Gabriel. Thanks. Gabriel nodded and thought curiously, class A, huh? I wonder what human schools are like. The next second, this angel, top of her class from the angel school, sensed that Yoru's mood had suddenly dropped to rock bottom. She turned her head and saw Yoru staring at his phone, brows deeply furrowed, his legs twitching with agitation. Damn it. Damn it all. Yoru's good mood for the day was ruined. Just as he expected, the school forum was full of comments under multiple posts accusing him of stealing Kazumi-Joka's stockings and panties. Kitakami-kun, what's wrong? Did something happen? Gabriel asked gently. Hearing that, Yoru looked at the cute girl beside him, hesitating slightly. If he told her, would she hate him? This friend he had finally made? During the spring trip a few days ago, I was falsely accused of stealing a girl's stockings and panties. They had no evidence, but no one believed me. Now everyone at school is saying I'm the culprit. Clenching his teeth, Yoru decided to tell Gabriel while watching her reaction carefully. He hadn't planned to lie. Gabriel would find out sooner or later. It wasn't something he could hide. Are you the culprit? Gabriel stretched lazily. No. Yoru said firmly, recalling the faces of several girls who had shown him thinly veiled disgust. Then what's the problem? Gabriel yawned casually. As an angel capable of destroying the world if she wanted, discerning whether someone was telling the truth was simple for her. But Yoru was a bit touched but then changed the subject. Gabriel, at school just pretend you don't know me, okay? Otherwise, you'll get dragged into this. Huh? It's fine, I don't mind. Gabriel waved it off like it was nothing, thinking humans could be such a pain sometimes. Yoru didn't know what to say. Just then, the train arrived. The two got off together. Shuchin was only a street away from the station. Most of the people on the street were students from Shuchin and nearby schools, plus a few passers-by. After a few minutes, they reached the high school division of Shuchin. Different years had separate buildings. Yoru naturally parted ways with Gabriel to go report to his class. He tried to avoid people as much as possible. But no matter what, he couldn't avoid being seen. Everyone already knew. Almost every person who passed him stared hard, and once he walked away, whispers and gossip began. Arriving at Class 2C's door, Yoru peeked inside and saw no students. Only Shizuka Hiratsuka was there, in a lab coat, smoking by the window. After checking in and collecting books, students were free to go. No one stayed in class until the opening ceremony. Knock knock. Yoru knocked on the door and walked in nervously. Oh, it's you? Hiratsuka turned, saw him, put out her cigarette, and returned to the podium. Sensei, thank you for what you did before. I really appreciate it. Yoru bowed sincerely. Well, I'm your homeroom teacher this year. If you want to thank me, behave yourself and study hard so the school won't expel you. Hiratsuka said nonchalantly. Got it, sensei. Yoru nodded blankly, taking in the mature, intellectual beauty known for being tough on students. Then he quickly filled out his personal details. Name, height, weight. For the custom school uniform. Tuition had already been wired directly to the school's account. With time to spare before the opening ceremony, Yoru didn't want to stay in the classroom and left. Coincidentally, Ariri was in Class 2B. Their classrooms were on the same floor. Right next door. Chapter 19, A breeze on the rooftop. Keeping his head down, Yoru quickly walked out of the classroom. While passing Class 2B, Ariri, who was chatting with classmates, caught a glimpse of him. Ariri, what's wrong? A girl asked curiously. It's nothing. Ariri replied, clearly troubled. Leaving the building, Yoru glanced around. Shuchin was clean, elegant, and filled with blooming flowers. Beautiful enough to be mistaken for a manor estate. But he had nowhere to go. Sighing, Yoru decided to buy a drink and find a quiet spot to sit alone. There were many vending machines around Shuchin. Soon, Yoru found one. There was a black-haired girl with twin tails crouching beside it, visible only from the side, seemingly troubled over what to pick. Afraid of being misunderstood, Yoru kept his distance and silently waited nearby. San-san, haven't you decided yet? The twin-tailed girl's companion. A girl with peach gold hair, visible only from behind. Asked the one called San-san. Huh? Yoru was a bit surprised when he heard that. Why did that girl's cat have the same name as his fat cat? What a coincidence. Sorry, Kohanami, I'm just not in a good mood. The twin-tailed girl casually bought a drink and turned back to speak. She really didn't seem to be in a good mood, like she'd lost something she cared deeply about. Alright. Her companion had already noticed Yoru and quickly urged her along. After the two girls walked off with their drinks, Yoru finally approached the vending machine. The selections were plentiful. Juices, milk, coffee. And 2 shelves were filled with chocolates and sandwiches. He spent 500 yen on a bottle of sugar-free, low-fat black coffee. Standing in front of the machine, Yoru took a tentative sip and immediately grimaced at the bitter taste. But he didn't throw it away. He simply carried it with him and walked off. Wandering through a more secluded area of Shuchin's campus, Yoru circled back toward the classroom building. He climbed the stairs. Again and again. Holding the bitter black coffee, now half finished. As he passed his classroom, he glanced in but continued climbing. The top floor was the 7th. Home to the rooftop. In a lot of Jinshai, this is where some creepy fat male protagonist or faceless guy would lure the heroine up to fight. Yoru took a sip of the bitter coffee and noticed the rooftop door's lock looked worn, like it could be forced open. He felt a small sense of relief. So, using his pudgy hands, he gave it a few hard pulls and popped it open. Let's cool off up here before going back down. Yoru stepped onto the rooftop and gently pulled the door shut behind him. Hugh. A breeze swept through. Yoru squinted, his hair fluttering. His round, pale face looked a bit more relaxed. A short knee-high wall had been built around the rooftop to prevent accidents. The ground was dusty and littered with trash and fallen leaves. Not exactly clean. There was an old two-person bench facing Shuchin's clock tower. Yoru walked over and saw the bench wobble slightly. At his weight, it seemed like it might collapse. But as it turned out, the bench was sturdier than it looked. He sat, facing the distant clock tower, sipping his bitter black coffee as the breeze blew past. After a while, he checked the time and finally left. Did the wind blow this door open? Or did someone mess with it? He mumbled as he left, loosely relocking the weak latch before heading back to the classroom. By the time Yoru returned, it was nearly time for the opening ceremony, and the classroom was almost full. He chose to enter through the back door, not wanting to draw attention. He didn't want to be stared at with strange looks. Plus, his assigned seat was already at the back. Last row, by the window. Seats were assigned based on the Japanese syllabary and changed every term. Japanese high schools had 3 terms a year. Yoru kept his head down as he sat at the desk with his nameplate. To his left was the window, to his right sat a flashy blonde girl named Mira Yumeko. She was fairly well known in school. Yoru remembered skimming the class list during registration and had seen her name. As he was thinking that, he noticed from the corner of his eye that Yumeko was watching him. These girls. Yoru hesitated for a moment, then turned his head. There she was. Yumeko. Blonde, fair-skinned, with delicate features and dazzling emerald green eyes. She was half-turned, one hand holding her phone, the other idly twirling a lock of hair with her slender finger, sizing him up. When she saw Yoru turn his head, she stared straight into his eyes. "Hey, you're the one who stole Kasumijoka Utaha's stuff, right?" Her expression shifted slightly as she spoke. "It wasn't me," Yoru said in a deep voice. "But everyone says it was. Why would Kasumijoka Utaha accuse you and not someone else?" Yumeko seemed amused, chuckled, and flashed a set of perfect white teeth. "Because I'm fat, disgusting, a gross otaku, and I look easy to bully." Yoru gritted his teeth, forcing the words out from his throat, glaring at her. "Ha! You!" Her reaction was not at all what Yumeko expected. It actually startled her. She didn't know how to respond. She stared blankly for a moment, then finally said, "Humphrey, whatever. Just don't bother me if we're seatmates." "Got it." Yoru turned his head back. He had thought she'd tear into him with insults. After all, she was known as the flaming queen of the normie girls. To most people, he was a perverted criminal. Creepy, gloomy, and repulsive. Meanwhile, the rest of the class had noticed Yoru's return and began whispering among themselves with their seatmates. People who had barely interacted before suddenly found common ground in talking about him. Sitting by the window, Yoru stared at the scenery outside, his expression calm. But his fists were clenched so tight they turned white. Kasumijoka, Shinomiya, the real culprit. Damn all of you. A while later, Hiratsuka returned, and the classroom quieted down. She said a few routine homeroom things, assigned class representatives and cleaning duties. Then, just in time for the opening ceremony, she led Class 2C to the auditorium. Auditorium. "It's so beautiful, this hall." A freshman passed by Yoru and exclaimed as they looked at the massive, palace-like auditorium ahead. It was huge and luxuriously equipped, easily accommodating all the high school teachers and students. Concerts, large-scale theater performances. All were held here. Seats were arranged by class. Which meant Yoru had to sit with Yumeko, the blonde girl who clearly wasn't easy to deal with. Whether that was misfortune or luck was anyone's guess. Either way, many people were secretly jealous of him. Those slender, flawless pale legs, full of energy and life, stretched out the next to Yoru in black ankle boots. Dazzling and impossible to ignore. "If you dare look or have any filthy thoughts, I'll gouge out your eyes," Yumeko warned coldly, looking at him like he was trash. Yoru didn't even glance at her. He said nothing and quietly stared at the principal on stage. Shuchin Academy didn't waste time with long-winded speeches. The principal finished quickly, and the new student council president stepped up, Miyuki Shirogane. Vice President Shinomiya Kaguya, President Miyuki Shirogane. Yoru muttered as he looked at the stage. In fact, back in their first year, Shirogane had been his seatmate. Chapter 20, Shinomiya Kaguya's treasure chest. 1 year ago, Shirogane had been Yoru's desk mate. Just like now, he sat next to Yumeko. Yoru looked at Shirogane on stage and recalled the past. He remembered clearly. Back then, Shirogane was above average in looks, good at studying, but kind of dumb. At the start of the year, he eagerly greeted the promoted pure students in class, only to be ignored again and again. He froze in place, doubting himself. That scene made Yoru secretly laugh. Later, Shirogane tried other ways to join their circles. Every attempt ended in total rejection. During lunch, he would hide beside the trash cans to eat cheap bread alone. How did Yoru know? Because he was hiding in an even darker corner, watching Shirogane. Later on, for reasons unknown, Shirogane joined the student council. Not long after, he somehow got into a few cliques and started becoming popular by the second term. By the end of the third term, he ran against Kaguya for vice president. And actually won. It was unheard of in Shechen's history. Those pure students were arrogant and proud, looking down on commoners from the bottom of their hearts. To them, regular students were nothing but society's bottom-tier fodder. Cattle, grass, disposable tools. Japan. And most countries were like that. Yoru's father, Kitakami Toyoitani, worked in finance and venture capital. Growing up in that environment, Yoru knew just how terrifying the elite class could be, especially when it came to profit. They were ruthless, viewing human lives as expendable. The higher the class, the crueler they were. I wonder, how does Shirogane get along with that Shinomiya? Yoru's fists tightened as he thought of her again. So boring. Yumiko shifted into a more comfortable position with a sigh. It really is boring, Yoru silently agreed. Not long after, the student council speech ended. People around them all stood up and rushed out like bees from a hive. Yumiko stayed seated, playing on her phone. Once most of the people had left, two girls from the same class. One with a bun hairstyle, the other wearing glasses. Both quite cute, walked over and left together. Yoru sat quietly, deciding he'd only leave once the hall had emptied out completely. I'll take San-san to the pet clinic this afternoon. Bored, Yoru pulled out his phone and searched for pet clinics or hospitals near his apartment. If not those, even a pet store would do. The Minato ward was the most prosperous and affluent district in Tokyo. With a quick search on his phone, he easily found a highly rated pet clinic near his apartment. Once the crowd had thinned, Yoru got up to leave. In the next instant, just as he stood up, his gaze swept across the stage and his entire body froze, as if struck by lightning. He couldn't move a muscle. On the stage, Shirogane hadn't left. He was still talking with the student council members. One of them was Fujiwara Chika, with pink hair and a black bow tied near her bangs. She was also one of the most untouchable people in the entire school. And the other was none other than Shinomiya Kaguya, whom Yoru had been thinking about constantly. But what truly locked Yoru's gaze wasn't Kaguya herself. It was that, above her head, there was a treasure chest exactly like the one above Utaha's. The only difference was that the progress bar on Kaguya's treasure chest was empty, while Utaha's had increased just a little. Why? Why does Shinomiya have one too? Yoru sat back down abruptly, his fat face squishing together from the shock. The only thing they have in common is that both of them hate me. Both are awful women. Could it be that every bad woman has one of these treasure chests that only I can see? Otherwise, Hiratsuka-sensei is beautiful, Fujiwara is cute too, but neither of them have one? With no one around, Yoru began muttering to himself as he often did. He was fat, but not stupid. In fact, he was quite sharp. But what about the progress bar? Is it really what I think? Does it increase through close contact? As he stared at the student council trio on stage, a chill crept down his spine. Close contact with Utaha, with Kaguya. That was basically asking to be killed. It wasn't until Shirogane, Kaguya, and Chika all left the stage that Yoru snapped out of it. He got up heavily, still troubled, and only when the three left through a different exit did he look away. By the way, doesn't it seem like Shinomiya might have a crush on Shirogane? As Yoru walked toward the exit, he muttered to himself. Well, it made sense. Liking Shirogane was totally reasonable. After all, it wasn't like she'd fall for someone like him, right? The area near the auditorium was already nearly empty. Yoru had deliberately stayed until the very end, just to avoid unnecessary trouble being pinned on him. But as soon as he stepped out of the hall, three boys came out and blocked his path. It was obvious they'd been waiting for a while. You're Kitakami Yoru, right? Hold up a second. What do you want? Yoru's heart immediately flared with anger as he glared at the three boys in front of him. He instinctively assumed they were here to pick a fight, probably the same guys who had been leaving nasty comments on the school forum. Beat him up, gain Kasumijoka Utaha's gratitude? Maybe they thought it'd help them win her over? Self-righteous men and women were the same. So disgusting. Yoru silently loathed them. He compared his own physique with theirs and felt a bit more at ease. I must not strike first. Only retaliate if I'm attacked. Otherwise I risk getting expelled. No, don't misunderstand. We're not here to mess with you. Surprisingly, one of the boys saw Yoru's defensive stance and quickly waved his hands with a smile, even looking a bit apologetic. Then what do you want? Yoru blinked in surprise, clearly puzzled. Well, about Kasamijoka Utaha's stockings and panties. Do you still have them? Yoru's face immediately collapsed, gritting his teeth as he growled, I didn't steal them. She already took them back. Don't come asking me to sell them. With that, Yoru stepped aside and walked off quickly. Hey, wait up. Name your price. Bastard. Acting like a saint now. Bet you had your fun with them already. The three boys shouted angrily, clearly humiliated. In the shadows, Hayasaka, who had been secretly tailing Yoru, stuck out her soft pink tongue in disgust and whispered, some guys are really revolting. Chapter 21, Pervert Classmate Criminal. They really came looking to buy Kasamijoka Utaha's stockings and panties. Yoru muttered bitterly as he pushed open the door to his apartment. After taking off his shoes at the entrance, he walked in. The fat cat San-san was fast asleep on the soft sofa. Cats were nocturnal, after all. San-san, I met a cute girl today who has the same name as you. As he passed by the sleeping cat, Yoru gently stroked its plump body. If only you, my little girl cat, could be as cute as her. He chuckled and walked into the kitchen to prepare his low-fat diet meal. 300 grams of cooked high-quality rice provided the necessary carbs. Low oil, low salt. Vegetables and lean meats were fine to eat. Just avoid oily skin and fat. Yoru used a rice cooker to make the rice, then pulled out a bunch of fresh lettuce from the fridge. He washed it, blanched it briefly in hot water, and laid it neatly on a plate. Then he threw minced garlic into a pan, added a bit of soy sauce, salt, chili, and oil, along with some water. He boiled it down, then poured the sauce evenly over the lettuce. A low-oil version of garlic oyster sauce lettuce. Done. Yoru clapped his hands, a bit proud of himself. He had long realized he had a bit of talent for cooking. Next up was preparing some meat. The fridge was packed with supplies. He took out a chunk of imported frozen beef, sliced it up generously without hesitation. The beef was from South America. Cheaper than domestic meat and easy to eat guilt-free. Many BBQ joints, restaurants, and buffets use this kind of meat. While the beef was marinating, Yoru sliced half an onion to stir-fry with the meat later. He blanched the beef, drained it, then added a bit of oil to the pan. Then came the beef and onion. After finishing his lunch, Yoru returned to the sofa in the living room to rest and digest. To be honest, diet meals didn't fill him up. When hungry, he just drank more water. By afternoon, San-san, who'd been sleeping all morning, finally woke up. Meow. The first thing the cat did was leap into Yoru's lap and nuzzle against him. I'll take you out in a bit. Yoru picked up the fat cat. It was so soft and round, extremely pleasant to hold. Not long after, he fed San-san a bit of food. Then, braving the blazing sun, Yoru carried San-san outside. There was a pet clinic about a kilometer away on a nearby commercial street. Under the harsh sun, Yoru finally reached the clinic. It was empty inside except for a woman in a white coat. An older pet doctor. I'd like to have my cat's fur trimmed a bit, remove some knots, do internal and external deworming, and get her vaccinated. The clinic was small. Yoru addressed the woman directly. First take her to the back for a washing to I'll write up an order. Just a moment. The woman said, pointing to a door inside. Okay, thank you. Yoru replied casually and carried San-san through the door. Behind it was the grooming area and the pet boarding space. Meow meow. Red bin. Meow. As soon as he entered, Yoru saw Yukino Shita. Yukino crouched on the floor wearing a vet's smock, playing with a kitten in a cage using a toy wand. Yukino Shita. Yukino, like Utaha and Ariri, was one of the top-tier beauties at Shuchen Academy. At a school full of wealthy elite children, good looks were almost a given. There were plenty of cute and pretty girls. Excuse me. Yoru stood at the door for a while. Yukino was so focused on playing with the kitten that she hadn't noticed him. Finally, he couldn't help but speak. Sorry. Startled, Yukino quickly stood up, flustered. Her expression, and the way she had been playing with the cat just moments ago. Yoru saw it all. I didn't expect the Ice Queen Yukino Shita Yukino to have this side to her. Boys at Shuchen who like her probably have no idea what she's like behind the scenes. Yoru secretly muttered in his heart, recalling what little he knew about her. Just that she was called the Ice Queen, academically excellent, and he'd seen her from a distance maybe twice. No real impression beyond that. They weren't familiar at all. After standing up, Yukino spent a few seconds masking her expression and emotions. After all, doing something like that in front of others, especially someone of the opposite sex, was bound to make her feel a bit embarrassed. You seem to be thinking some rather impolite thoughts, pervert criminal classmate. Yukino had recognized the visitor standing before her. Yoru wasn't surprised. In a way, he was already a known figure. Just with a notorious reputation. It wasn't me who stole it. Yoru didn't want to waste his breath with a beautiful girl like Yukino. He casually rebutted her, then set San down on the floor. Give her a wash and trim the matted fur, he said afterward. So chubby, so round. Yukino Shita's eyes were instantly drawn to the fat cat. She muttered it unconsciously. Yoru's expression didn't change one bit. He didn't giddily rejoice like a child over uncovering this unknown side of one of the Academy's top beauties. She's so cute. So chubby. Is this your cat? Yukino suddenly picked San up and even glanced at Yoru as she asked. Yeah. Yoru nodded in sly surprise. Yukino had actually initiated a conversation with him? What's her name? Yukino held San up, her clear blue eyes widening slightly. Was that a smile? San. Written with the character for 3. Yoru looked at Yukino and continued, you seem to really like cats? My personal preferences don't concern you, pervert criminal classmate. Yukino's face turned cold in an instant. She glanced at Yoru with a frosty glare. That's my cat. Yoru shrank back a little. No wonder she's so fat living with you. Not cute at all. Yukino's hands continued to gently rub San even as she shot Yoru another icy look. Huh. Wait a minute. She's actually quite slim. Just looks fat because of her fur? Yukino looked down in surprise at San, whose round amber eyes darted about curiously as she obediently rested in her arms. What? Yoru froze. San was considered slim? If she ate just a bit more and reached a normal weight, wouldn't she turn into a rolling black puffball? Wouldn't she jiggle all over when she walked? Also, didn't you just say my San was cute? As her owner, you're not starving her or anything, right? Not giving her enough food? Yukino hugged San protectively, with a look that made it seem like she was the rightful owner. She stared at Yoru suspiciously. Chapter 22, Peeping Tom again. Hey, that's my cat. Yoru screamed internally. Did Yukino seriously think she was San's real owner now? San used to be a stray. I happened to find her and took her in. Yoru explained. Really? Yukino eyed the fat slob in front of her with suspicion. Someone who'd steal a girl's panties and stockings wouldn't normally be that kind-hearted. Alright, then. You can leave now. I need to work. With one hand holding San, Yukino waved at Yoru with the other, as if swatting away a fly. Yoru turned and walked out to the front of the clinic. Come to think of it, Yukino's family was in construction, right? If he remembered correctly, his own home was developed by the Yukino Shita family. Even though she wasn't on the same level as Shinomiya, she was still a rich girl. Why would she take a part-time job at a pet clinic? Does she just love cats? Still, Yoru wasn't about to bother asking. They barely knew each other. Yukino's aloofness was practically written on her face. Hey student, come over here. The older pet doctor called out. Yoru walked over to pay for the grooming, vaccination, and deworming. It wasn't expensive. The pet clinic wasn't trying to squeeze money out of people, and they even threw in a few free cat supplies. He then strolled around the clinic, picking up some cat care knowledge. Once he felt ready, he returned to the back room. As soon as he entered, he saw Yukino's back as she placed the freshly bathed and trimmed San onto a clean table. Using a towel and a hairdryer, she was helping dry San's fur. It looked like she was nearly done. Yoru was just about to step inside. Then he saw Yukino lift San up with both hands and press her face against her. Oh, so cute. Chubby and adorable. So soft, so well-behaved. Yukino not only nuzzled her face into the cat, but also let out some unusually sweet and affectionate cooing sounds. What? Yoru stood frozen, unsure whether to laugh or be stunned. Was Yukino Shita really that fond of cats? Had he just accidentally discovered the secret side of the Academy's ice-cold beauty? If the boys who secretly admired Yukino found out that a fat slob like him had seen her like this, wouldn't they be driven mad with jealousy? Meow. San, tired of all the nuzzling, stuck out her round head and looked toward her real owner. The moment she saw Yoru, she let out a cry for help. Realizing something, Yukino whipped her head around. Only to lock eyes with Yoru standing at the doorway. She completely froze, brain crashing from embarrassment. She quickly turned away, face flushed. San seized the moment and escaped, hopping over to Yoru. Now that she's been washed and trimmed, she looks even cuter. Yoru said casually as he picked her up. Peeping Tom classmate, why did you suddenly come in? Yukino turned back around, glaring with her icy blue eyes as she questioned Yoru sternly. This is a public space. I came here as a paying customer. And besides, she's my cat. You didn't ask me before handling her like that. That's not really okay, is it? Yoru stared her down without flinching, throwing the question right back at her. How had he become a peeping Tom now? Huh? What? Yukino was momentarily stunned by the counter. Her expression turned awkward. If there were a hole in the floor, she would have gladly crawled into it. You should have at least knocked or said something, instead of silently appearing behind someone, she said, quickly regaining her usual composure. I won't tell anyone. Don't worry. Yoru replied, glancing at the top of her head. No golden treasure chest. But Yukino was just as beautiful as Kasumijoka Utaha and Shinomiya Kaguya. So it seemed the appearance of those golden chests had nothing to do with looks. Carrying San-san, Yoru went back to the front to finish the vaccination and external deworming. Yukino remained inside, covering her face and taking deep breaths. Half an hour later. After the treatments were done, Yoru was leaving the clinic with San-san in his arms when Yukino suddenly came running out. Wait a second. She looked at the well-behaved San-san in Yoru's arms, a hint of reluctance in her eyes. What is it? Yoru asked, surprised. I forgot to mention. San-san is a spayed female. Her frame is a bit slim, so you can feed her a bit more. Make sure to feed her small amounts multiple times a day. Since she used to be a stray, her digestive system isn't in the best shape. Yukino looked up, her expression calm again as she gave Yoru these instructions. Alright, I understand. Thank you. Yoru glanced down at San-san. Wait. Also. Yukino stopped him again. If San-san ever gets sick or acts strange, you can come to our school club room. The service club. To find me. She added. Service club. That name sounds kinda weird. Yoru commented. Ugh. Yukino sighed. It's a club dedicated to helping others. If San-san never has issues, come ask me. I know more about cats than you do. New cat owners often can't tell when something's wrong. You need to pay attention. Got it. Thanks. You really do love cats, huh? Yoru nodded. What I like has nothing to do with Kitakami-san, does it? Yukino shot him a sharp look. Yoru didn't answer. He simply waved casually and left. Yukino watched him go with a hint of envy in her eyes. Why couldn't she find a cute and obedient fat cat like that? The high-end apartment she lived in didn't allow pets. Sure, she could come work at the pet clinic during holidays to get her cat obsession fix. But that was only possible during long breaks. Tomorrow was the official start of school. Yukino had even considered whether she should move to a more ordinary place. Living alone in a high-rise tower apartment, sometimes it felt strange having such a large space all to himself. Chapter 23, Graffiti and Bullying. The first official day of school. After finishing his workout, Yoru stood in the shower room, wiping the water from his body while facing the mirror. Staring at his fat reflection, he thought bitterly about Kaguya's sudden interference, demanding that he rank in the top 30 in overall grades this school year. So this was what the so-called student council, which held power over all school affairs, was like. Vice President Kaguya was no exception. All she did was help Utaha bully him. What Yoru didn't know was that Kaguya partly did it out of student council duty and partly because, as the Shinomiya family's heiress, she was genuinely concerned. But to Yoru, it was all the same. Equally detestable. He got dressed and packed his lunch, made at home, 300 grams of carefully measured rice, a large portion of vegetables, and clean lean meat, all packed neatly into his lunchbox. He gave a quick pat to San-san, who was still snoozing, then stepped out the door. Morning, Gabriel. Yoru greeted as he passed by Gabriel, who was standing in the hallway enjoying the breeze. Morning. I was kind of excited last night, couldn't sleep. Gabriel responded with graceful composure. The two walked one after the other down from the apartment toward the train station. You don't look like someone who didn't sleep well. Yoru glanced at Gabriel's cute face, then looked up at the sky. A little gloomy. Typical of the rainy season. He figured he should start carrying an umbrella just in case. After walking a few minutes to the station, then riding and walking again, they reached school. At the school gate, they split up. Because they lived nearby, they tended to arrive just before morning reading began. Shuchin Academy was massive and absurdly luxurious. By this time, hardly anyone lingered outside. Yoru changed into his indoor shoes on the first floor and headed toward his classroom. There were still about 10 minutes left until the start of class. Every classroom was lively and noisy. Groups of friends chatted together. As Yoru passed by Class 2B, he saw Iriri sitting by the window, resting her cute, fair face against her hand in boredom, gazing outside. Her eyes were immediately drawn to Yoru, who walked past quickly with his head down. She watched until his bulky body disappeared from view. Unfortunately, Yoru didn't look up when he passed by the back door of his classroom. Otherwise, he would have been shocked to see the same kind of golden treasure chest hovering above Arire's head. Identical to the ones above Utaha and Kaguya. His own classroom was no different from the others, except maybe a bit noisier. Yoru could hear people talking about him, both boys and girls. None of it good. He was long used to it, so he showed no reaction and went straight to his seat. Bastards. Damn it. Standing in front of his desk, Yoru saw that the once clean and tidy surface had been defaced with black marker scribbles. There were insulting drawings. Turtles, pig heads. And words like disgusting and curses written across the desk. The entire surface had been ruined by graffiti. Rage welled up in his chest. Yoru clenched his fists and quickly glanced around the classroom. Suddenly, everything quieted down. His so-called classmates just stared at him in silence, mocking him with their eyes. No different from how people looked at animals in a zoo. This was bullying. Yoru said nothing. He quietly put his bag down and sat at his desk. The classroom slowly returned to its usual noise. Yoru shifted his chair closer to the window and clenched his fists tightly, knuckles white. But he couldn't do anything. He didn't know who the culprit was. Male or female, from his class or another. Just like he hadn't known who had stolen Utaha's underwear and stockings. Even if he found out, would he dare retaliate? What if the perpetrator came from a wealthy or political family? In Japan, these people colluded with capital and bureaucracy. They protected their own. With a mere gesture, they could make his father lose his job. Finance was a closed circle. If expelled, his father might never be able to work in it again. An overwhelming sense of helplessness spread in Yoru's chest. Damn it. His hatred for Utaha and Kaguya grew even deeper. If he had the chance, he'd rather turn them both into heat-crazed, shameless whores than let them go free. Before long, morning reading ended. After the first 3 periods of class, it was time for the hour-and-a-half lunch break. Shuchin Academy had a student cafeteria and vending machines selling bread and ready-made meals. When lunch began, half the class disappeared. Yoru quietly took out his diet meal from his bag and started eating. After finishing and packing up his lunchbox, he left through the back door and went to a familiar vending machine to buy a can of black coffee. Still bitter as ever. After taking a sip, he returned to the school building. He had originally wanted to go to the front terrace and relax in the breeze, but the overcast sky made him change his mind. Back in the classroom, he flipped open his notebook to review the morning's notes. Yoru wasn't good at studying in high school. He needed to start from the basics, lay a solid foundation, then build up gradually. This time, no matter what, he was going to stick it out. About half an hour later, Yoru drank the last drop of his black coffee, closed his notebook, and pulled out his phone to kill time. Shocking. Tsubasu's aura predicts Axis versus Allies. Japan wins 2-1 over Hans. Top betting agency claims the World Cup winner will come from Samba Army, 3 Lions, or Matadors. Football, huh? Yoru liked football. His interest was piqued instantly. Just as he was about to dive in, the back door of the classroom opened. His deskmate Yumiko walked in with several classmates. They gathered around her, chatting excitedly. A long-haired blonde boy with a hairband, looking like a delinquent, suddenly leaned toward Yoru. It startled him. Hey. You're that guy, right? Kitakami something? Haha, you're kind of famous. Tobekakeru said, making exaggerated expressions and gesturing as he spoke. Yoru looked up and gave him a glance before turning his head away. People like this weren't worth dealing with. Ignoring them was best. Oh, come on, don't be like that, Kitakami whatever guy. You're famous, you know? How about a selfie together? Tobe laughed and, without asking, slung his arm over Yoru's shoulder as if to snap a picture. I don't want to. Without even looking, Yoru used his thick hand to grab Tobe's wrist and easily pushed it away. The brute strength froze the forced grin on Tobe's face. Chapter 24, Only bitches have treasures above their head. Come on, it's just a selfie. No need to be like that. He laughed awkwardly, trying again with his phone. He hadn't really wanted a picture. He just thought it'd be fun to mess with Yoru. What he hadn't expected was that Yoru didn't just submit quietly. He'd even pushed him away. It made Tobe feel like he'd lost face, especially in front of classmates and friends. He needed to get his pride back. Let go. Take your hand off me. Yoru growled. He shoved Tobe again, this time harder. Tobe had used a bit of force himself.